want to introduce you to this professor who I saw in an interview on The Hill, which is this video I'm about to show you real quick to introduce you to this guy. I was intrigued because of his prediction. Well, let's just play the video. So this is The Hill, which is a news outlet. Well, I guess it's a show from The Hill, Breaking Points, because she and her co-host are both on The Hill news network. It's like it's more middle ground, not partisan, left or right, or at least the way I've viewed it. But this Professor Jane predicts that the United States will lose the Iran war. And I think this is important. Just check a little bit about this.
Heavy hitter guest and first-time guest on the show, Professor Zhang. He is the star of the popular YouTube channel Predictive History. He uses game theory to analyze past, current, and to predict future geopolitical events. And he joins us now. Professor, great to have you.
Good to see you, sir.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So, for people who aren't familiar with your work, I wanted to show folks that back in 2024, you made 3 big predictions. 1, that Trump would win. 2, that he would start a war with Iran. And 3, that the U.S. would lose that war. Let's take a listen to that.
In this class this semester, I'm making 3 big predictions, right? First is that Trump will win in November. Second is that the United States will go to war against Iran. And the third big prediction is that the United States will lose this war, which will forever change the global order.
So obviously that last one is the only one that has not yet come to fruition. Is quite a stunning prediction. You know, do you stand by it? And what have you seen so far that leads you to?
That's very interesting. He got 2 of his 3 predictions to come to pass so far. The third hasn't yet. Is he? I'm not saying he's a prophet or anything like that. He doesn't claim that either, but he's just, he's analyzing things and making calculated guesses to predict events that dealing with geopolitical topics. So I don't know too much about the man. I've watched a few of his videos. We're going to watch another video in a moment here, but I'll let him continue this part.
Sort of stand firm in that conclusion.
So given my analysis of how the war is progressing, I think that Iran has many more advantages over the United States. The reality is that right now, it's a war of attrition between the United States and Iran. And the Iranians have been preparing 20 years for this conflict. In their eschatology, in their religion, this is a war against the great Satan. They've had many practice runs. Last June was a 12-day war when the Iranians were able to examine and analyze the strike capacities of both the Israelis and the Americans. And they've had a lot of time, 8 months, to prepare fully for this new attack. They, through their proxies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Shia militias, have been able to really grasp the American mentality. And now they have a pretty good strategy of how to weaken and ultimately destroy the American empire. So what the Iranians are doing is they're waging war against the entire global economy. And so they are striking the GCC countries. And not only are they striking GCC countries, American bases, but they're going after the critical energy infrastructure of these bases. They blocked off the Strait of Hormuz. And eventually, they will go after the water desalination plants.
Wow. So I'm not really sure what GCC countries are. So let's Gulf Cooperation Council is a political and economic union of 6 Arab states bordering the Persian Gulf: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Established in 1981, it aims to foster integration, coordination, and cooperation in economic, social, and security affairs among its member states. Okay. He mentioned also the Strait of Hormuz. You might be familiar with that by now because I think that's been talked about in the news. As you can see, popular here. Strait of This is the Strait of Hormuz. Why is it significant? It's a strait between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. It provides the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, and it's one of the world's most strategically important choke points. A lot of oil goes through here and gets out through here. So that's important. Then he mentioned something about the last part about the water, which I didn't quite grasp. We're going to back that up a little bit here.
The critical energy infrastructure of these bases. They blocked off the Strait of Hormuz, and eventually they will go after the water desalination plants, which is the lifeblood of these nations because they don't have fresh water supply. In fact, the water desalination plants provides 60% of the GCC's water supply.
Water consolidation plants. That's what he said. Okay.
So if a drone, and these drones cost $50,000, if they wiped out a desalination plant in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and it's a city of 10 million people, right? They'd be out of water in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. And right now, the Iranians have de facto closed off the Strait of Hormuz, and the GCC gets 90% of its food from the Strait of Hormuz. So I know a lot of people are talking about the disruptions to the global economy, but right now, the Iranians are actually threatening the very existence of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. And why this is important is that the Gulf states are really the linchpin of the American economy. So what they do is they sell petrodollars and then they recycle the petrodollars back into the American economy through the investments in the stock market. And right now, we know that the entire American economy is propped up by AI investments in data centers. And a lot of that comes from the Gulf states. So if the Gulf states are no longer able to sell oil, and they're no longer able to finance AI, this AI bubble in the United States, then this AI bubble will burst, and with it will burst as well the entire American economy, which is really a financial Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So that's a dire situation that the Americans are facing right now.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, sir.
Did you catch that? He said the American economy is a financial Ponzi scheme, which I forgot he said this, or maybe I didn't catch that. But if you check out the name of that, the biggest scam. You want to catch something? You want to be very interested about
change the world. Our monetary
our
system
debt,
down to
our
earning
monetary
interest.
system, and
Now
everything.
called bank credit in its place.
This will blow your mind. You need to understand. Matter of fact, you need to watch this. When you get done watching this, go watch this video. The biggest scam in the history of mankind, Hidden Secrets of Money, episode 4. It's on the Gold Silver web channel. You'll understand why this man says the American economy is a Ponzi scheme. Just definitely watch this video. It will blow your mind. How debt is created, what they do, this whole workflow here. The Federal Reserve Bank, all the steps. Okay. That wasn't my point, though. I'm not trying to watch this. What I wanted to get to was this video here. The law of eschatological convergence. I watched this an hour ago or so. Woke up out the blue. It's the middle of the night right now. This is something I want to discuss. So let's get started here.
As I mentioned last class, there are three major questions that will determine how this war is fought, what this war will end up looking like, and how the world will change. And as I discussed last class, I'm making three predictions about this war. The first is the United States will use ground troops. And this will mean that Donald Trump will institute a national draft. Okay? That's the first prediction. Second prediction is that Israel and the United States will not use tactical nuclear weapons in this war. Number three is that the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in the Islamic world, will be destroyed.
That is, I'm going to show you what he's talking about. They're referring to this mosque here. This is in Jerusalem. It is believed to be on the location where the Temple Mount was, the Jewish Temple Mount. The one that Solomon built and the one that was rebuilt. There was two temples, one in Solomon's day, and then first century, they got the second temple after the Jewish people came back home. The second temple was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. So this is said to be the Temple Mount. And there's this mosque on there, and he's claiming that this is going to be, he's predicting this to be destroyed. That would then, well, I'll let him explain that.
During this war. Okay, so last class I explained my analysis and my reasoning for my first two predictions. Today I'll explain my third prediction. So, but before we start, I just want to look at some videos, okay? So you understand some of the context, some of the players in this war. All right, so this is Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, and he is one of the 100 members of the US Senate. He's also one of the members of the Gang of Eight. Now, when you are fighting a war, the White House has responsibility to report its objectives, its purpose, how the war is progressing to 8 members of Congress in a confidential setting, okay? And this is Senator Blumenthal after he's been debriefed by the White House. Okay, and this is what he has to say about the progress of the war so far.
I emerged from this briefing as dissatisfied and angry, frankly, as I have from any past briefing in my 15 years in the Senate. I am left with more questions than answers, especially about the cost of the war. My questions have been unanswered, and I will demand answers because the American people deserve to know. And I guess I am most concerned about the threat to American lives of potentially deploying our sons and daughters on the ground in Iran. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here. And there is also, as disturbingly as anything else, the specter of active Russian aid to Iran, putting in danger American lives.
All right, So 3 things to take away from his talk with reporters, okay? The first thing is the administration, Donald Trump, the White House, has not articulated a budget. How much will this war cost? Which means that this is an open-ended war. We don't know when this war will end, and so we don't know what the commitment is, and so we don't know how much this war will cost, okay? That's the first point he makes. The second point he makes is we are on a path towards the deployment of ground troops in Iran, okay? And that basically means a national draft. And the third thing that's crucial is he says that they know for a fact that Russia is already involved in this war, aiding Iran. Okay? So that's the 3 main takeaways from
Now, pay attention to this. I watched, someone sent me this video on social media. Listen to the gentleman on the right. He's the foreign minister in Iran. This is scary. This is yeah, just watch.
Okay, so this is the foreign minister of Iran, Agachi, talking to NBC News. All right? And NBC News is going to ask Agachi, hey, there's talk in the United States already of ground troops being used against Iran. Okay? Now I want you to observe his response and then the response of the journalist.
President Trump has not ruled out boots on the ground in Iran. Are you afraid of a U.S. invasion in your country?
No, we are waiting for them.
Did you catch that? We're waiting for them.
You were waiting for the U.S. military to invade the ground troops?
Yes, because we are confident that we can confront them, and that would be a big disaster for them.
Okay, you understand? Okay?
Now, he has another video. Just a second. Let me look through my phone because Base Professor.
Small area, guys. It's called the
This is the
Strait of
video.
Hormuz. All right? And it's important because it's really the center of the world. This one area is the nexus, the pivot of the world. Let me explain why. First of all, from the GCC, you have 20% of all the world's oil flowing through this narrow strait. Where does it go, guys? It goes to Asia, India, Pakistan, South Korea, China, Japan. India depends on 60% of its oil from this area. China depends on 40%. Japan, 75%. Prime Minister Takaichi of Japan has said that, listen, if the Strait of Hormuz closes, we will run out of oil in about 8-9 months. The entire Japanese economy would collapse in 8-9 months if the Strait of Hormuz were to close. And guess what? The Iranians have closed the Strait of Hormuz. Okay? So we can expect that the entire global economy will suffer greatly over the next few months. All right? So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is, okay, so the GCC sends oil across the Strait of Hormuz, and what do they get back in return? Food, guys. All right, so
Again, the GCC is the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, Qatar. Saudi Arabia.
People don't appreciate the GCC, but it is really the linchpin of the American empire. Because what is the American empire? The American empire is the petrodollar. All right? The idea of the petrodollar is this. The US dollar is worth nothing. It's only valuable if people want it. But
He's absolutely right. That other video I talked about, the biggest scam in the history of the United States, you watch that whole video, this man is 100% spot on telling the truth. All right, let's continue.
the GCC says that if you want oil from us, you have to pay us in US dollars. Okay? Then that is the basis of the value of the US dollar. So, if the GCC collapses, the American economy and the American empire both collapse at the same time. The problem, though, is the GCC is an artificial construct of empire. It does not exist naturally. Why? Because there's no food, there's no oil, no water. Okay, guys? No food, no water.
I'm gonna speed this up.
So
to the
these
part
cities
where
are
he talks about ground
it's
troops.
these mountains. These mountains is what we call Iran. These mountains. And therefore bankrupt the American empire in order to strangle the global economy and therefore bankrupt the American empire. All right? Second thing you will notice is these mountains. These mountains is what we call Iran. All right, this is Iran. This is GCC. Okay, this is not a fair matchup, right? Because these are mountains. And what can you do in mountains? Well, you can hide rocket bases. You can hide drone bases. You can hide missiles. And that's the entire Iranian offensive strategy, all right? From here, they can hide missiles and drones from which to attack the GCC. And what are they attacking? They're attacking three things, right? They're attacking American military bases. American military bases. That's number one. Okay? Is it possible for the Americans to defend against these attacks? The answer is no. They're not, it's not. It's the silliest thing in the world. You have all these bases in the Middle East, but you cannot defend them against the Iranians. That's kind of strange. Okay, but that's number one. Number two is oil and energy.
Okay. The military advantage they have, as he noted out, was the mountains and what they can hide there, which is why he said he's waiting for us. That's scary. That's very scary. They start putting ground troops over there. There could be a lot of casualties for American troops.
So you're saying that Iran is ready and willing to take on the U.S. military if there were to be ground troops?
Well, we were ready for this.
Okay, so again, certain things to appreciate. First of all, the foreign minister, I got you, he is not at all concerned about ground troops. In fact, he basically said, it's a trap for you guys. You come in, we've been preparing for about 20 years for this, we will destroy you. Another thing that you will notice is the journalist is completely surprised by the answer. He's shocked into silence. He has to ask again, wait, are you saying you're ready for ground troops? And so this shows you that within Washington, D.C., okay, within the Trump administration, within the foreign policy elite, within the media elite, they haven't really thought this through out. They really haven't considered the possibility of losing this war. Washington, D.C. right now, it's a bubble, okay? It's an insular bubble where everyone just believes the same things. And that's very problematic if you are to continue fighting this war, okay? All right, let's continue. Okay, this
So as Israel has attacked, well, let's just back up a little bit. Let's talk about the nation of Israel. We're living in a time where people are questioning the Jewish people. Are they Hazars? They're not, they're saying they're not the real Jews. you check my channel, I have a 4-part series on that, and I will delve into other reasons why, despite some of the wicked things the Jewish people do, Bible, the history of that nation as recorded in the scriptures, basically points out that they were doing that all along. Like Moses went up to get the tablets, he came down, they were worshiping a golden calf. You know, the scriptures and the prophets talk about what they offered up their children to Molech. We'll get into all that. But the Bible records a backslidden people, like they backslide all the time and have done some evil things. And as far as the Jewish people as a whole, I'm not discussing in this particular aspect. We're talking about those in power, the government, the Israeli government, headed right now by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This video is important because I mean, people just attack the Jews as a whole, and I think that's like how people attack black people. If there's certain black people doing bad things wrong, I bring up black people because I'm part black. Doesn't mean we're all like that. You know what I'm saying? If there's a cultural aspect to black culture that does such and such thing, that doesn't mean the whole people as a whole are castigated under that. We're going to talk about Netanyahu and the rabbis and things of that nature and how that whole system is. I'll let him talk and then I'll add commentary as we go. Okay. But before I do that, I had to pull up this video because a colleague at work had sent me some things. They've been bringing up Israel. A couple of people have. And I'm you know, I have an affinity to the Jewish people because of the Messiah, who is the Jewish Messiah. But we have to talk about God's prophetic plan, what the scriptures say about the prophetic plan, the good and the bad about the people. But in this, I had forgot that I came across this video years ago. And it dawned on me, something I watched that my colleague sent me, and I was like, oh, I remember watching this. So pay close attention to this part here.
This is Rabbi Sneerson. And he is the leader, or he used to be, he's died, but he used to be the leader of an organization called the Shabbat Lubavitch.
It's the Chabad Lubavitch. Well, let's go back to YouTube since we're here. This is the spelling of it. We might need to give you a little background history on this movement here. Hasidic Judaism. Let's see here. This is Sneerson. He was a leader of this movement, and he passed away. I think he was born in Russia or Ukraine or Poland or somewhere of that nature. Came to the U.S. and he started the movement. He was based out of New York. He died in New York, I believe it was. But some of his followers believed that he is King Messiah. So let me, for those who may not know the concept of Messiah in Judaism, let's go to the Bible, because that's where it starts. there was a whole host of prophecies of the Messiah. I don't know why this program's taking forever. Let's just look at Messiah first. The promised Savior and deliverer foretold in the Old Testament scriptures, who is believed to be the anointed one of God, sent to redeem and save humanity from sin and bring about God's kingdom on earth. In Christian traditions, Jesus is the Messiah, the promised deliverer. In the Old Testament, Messiah can also refer more generally to someone set apart for a specific purpose. The term Messiah is derived from the Hebrew, and the Hebrew word is Mashiach, and means anointed one. So the concept of being anointed is the pouring of oil on an individual. And in the Old Testament scriptures, the Tanakh, what Jews call it, the Tanakh, prophets, priests, and kings were anointed. Interesting enough, Jesus is portrayed in the New Testament as being all three. Okay. What Old Testament prophecies speak of the Messiah? Okay. I'm not sure why this is not showing me this. Okay. God promised David that King David, that his descendant would establish an eternal kingdom with a throne enduring forever. So this is from 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 through 16. When your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, speaking of David, I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be a father to him. He will be a son to me. When he commits iniquity, I will correct him with the rod of men and the strokes of the sons of men. But my loving kindness shall not depart from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house, your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established forever. There's supposed to be a long list of descendants coming after David who shall reign on the king as king. But the ultimate fulfillment of that is there would be one day one person set up on David's throne, descended from David, who has an eternal kingdom. Jeremiah later identified this figure as a righteous branch who would reign as king, acting wisely and establishing justice and righteousness. Behold, this is Jeremiah 23, verses 5 through 6. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king and act wisely and do justice and righteousness in the land. In his days, Judah will be rescued or saved, and Israel will dwell securely. Now, in Jeremiah's time, Israel had divided as a nation. It became two nations. The northern tribes, the 10 northern tribes were called Israel, or the kingdom of Israel. And then the two southern tribes, which were Judah and Benjamin, were called Judah. So here it says, his days, Judah will be saved. Israel will dwell securely. They're talking about the divided kingdom. That division happened under David's son, King Solomon. And this is his name by which he will be called, the Lord our righteousness. And when you see the word the Lord in caps like this, the capital L, which is larger than the other capital letters, you have a capital O, R, D. This here is representative of the Tetragrammaton. It shows it at the bottom here, if you pay attention down here. So it says God there, but that's not what it says. It doesn't say God in the Hebrew. I don't know why it took me here. it was showing you this, the 4 letters. They call it the tetragrammaton, based on the Greek word for 4 and letter. Yod, Hey. Well, this is Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Hebrew is read right to left. English is written left to right. So it corresponds to the letter Y, H, W, H. Now, Hebrew is a consonantal language. They didn't originally write Hebrew with vowels. Later on, there was a development of a vowel pointing system where they would put dots and dashes below and above and sometimes in between the letters to indicate what the vowels were. But how they did it, they intended people to not speak the name of God for fear that someone might blaspheme the name of God. And what was done instead was circumlocutions. I just probably butchered the pronunciation of that. Circumlocution. Substitutes were used instead of that. One being like Adonai, which means the Lord or my Lord. How do I get back? We're under Messiah here. Mashiach. This is the Hebrew word. Now, the Messiah was, let me make the branch here. Interesting part about this, and I don't know if they talk about this. Sprout or shooting. This word has a connection to the location of where Jesus was lived, which is Nazareth. Netzar. Yeah. Okay, this thing's acting kind of slow, so we're just going to bypass all that. Let me get back to. Let me just go one place here. Genesis 3:15, which is believed to be the first prophecy of the Messiah. So this is after Adam had sinned and ate of the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. No, the Bible doesn't say it was an apple. It just says the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So when the Lord God called to the man who was Adam, he said to him, "Where are you?" He said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." So Adam perceived that he was naked after eating from the fruit of the tree. He got afraid. He heard the sound of God the Father in the garden, and he hid himself. And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" The man said, "The woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me from the tree, and I ate." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." The Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go, and dust you will eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity, which is hostility, between you and the woman, and between your seed, the serpent's seed, and her seed, her offspring. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. There's a whole connection to that in a verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, dealing with the resurrection of Christ and therefore the resurrection of believers in Christ. Death is swallowed up in victory. Satan, who the serpent is a representative here, is defeated. He may have bruised the heel of the seed of the woman, which is the Messiah, because they got him to get crucified, but he didn't ultimately win. The seed of the woman, which was the Messiah, bruised him on the head, which is a death blow. He resurrected, he triumphed over them, he showed that he was anointed. He was the Mashiach. He is the above all powers, rules, thrones, and authorities. This was prophesied in the book of Genesis. So bruising on the heel is totally different than being bruised on the head. You step on a snake's head, it's over with. So that's the prophecy of Messiah. We'll get back to this. Interesting thing about the Menachem Schneerson. This is the only Jewish messianic figure since Jesus they actually believe that the Messiah would rise again. They actually think Schneerson is going to be resurrected. His followers do. And they have a very charismatic the way they dance, sing, very things like that. It's kind of like akin to like the Pentecostal movement, like which I was trying to show you some of that stuff. This is you don't see like traditional Orthodox Jewish non-Chabad Lubavitch movements doing stuff like this. Or conservative Judaism, or even the Reform. Various sects of Judaism. Even in the first century, there was various sects of Judaism. You had the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, the Zealots, and some other groups. Okay. That's a little bit about. We're going to get back to Schneerson here. I don't think that Schneerson himself ever claimed to be the Messiah. He tried to hasten the Messiah's coming, and just from the conversation, it doesn't sound like he thinks that he himself is Messiah. He thinks it's somebody else. But it's interesting between what this conversation between him and Bibi Netanyahu or Benjamin Netanyahu had. And according to the video, this was recorded November 18th of 1990. This is before Netanyahu was prime minister. I'll pick this back up.
Okay, this is Rabbi Schneerson, and he is the leader, or he used to be, he's died, but he used to be the leader of an organization called the Shabbat Lubavitch. I'll be talking more about Shabbat Lubavitch as we go along, okay? But I introduce you to him now. This is year 1990, and he is talking to Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a young and upcoming politician in Israel, okay? And so let's look at the conversation. This is Netanyahu,
בזמן שישראל לאחרונה נתפסו כמה עניינים. מה שרואה עוד, וגם משהו שעדיין משאיר ליבו.
See, he says what hasn't changed, however, is that Mashiach still hasn't come. If he believed that he himself were Mashiach, a statement like that it would be out of place, don't you think? I think it would be kind of different there. I don't think he would refer to it as that. It sounds like he's talking about somebody else. Although his followers believe that he is. You'll see, I mean, like, let me show you. Let me show you. People go around with pictures of Schneerson. What do you call those posters? Long live the Rebbe. Rebbe is a different way of saying rabbi. Long live the Rebbe, King Messiah forever. Mashiach is here. So this is what they were saying of him. It's real, it's near, take part. Messiah is here with his photo on it. So he's a false Messiah, even though I don't know the man. I never followed his teachings or anything of that nature. But for his followers to proclaim him Messiah, he would be a false Messiah because he has not fulfilled any messianic prophecy, not where he was born. In fact, the scriptures talk about in the book of Daniel that he had to come before the destruction of the second Jewish temple. Man's well after that point. He's disqualified from being Messiah. So anyhow, let's get back to this. Do something to hasten.
Okay, so what's going on here? Okay, so as an up-and-coming politician, Netanyahu is going to the rabbi, and the rabbis are the most powerful people in the Jewish society. He basically says, will you give me your blessing? Will you support me in my political endeavors? And the rabbi says, yes. They also talk about how things are progressing, okay? So another way of saying this is that there's almost like a plan in motion to achieve certain religious objectives. And things are going well. But the Rabbi Schneerson says, but they're not going fast enough because we need the Messiah, the great leader of the Jewish people, to come. And we can set in motion things that will force the coming of the Messiah. So let's speed things up, Netanyahu. Okay?
We're going to take a break here in a second here. I will try to edit it out when I upload the video. However, the Jewish concept of the Messiah, who they were looking for, was a deliverer. During Jesus' time, they were looking for the one to deliver them from Rome, the oppression from Rome, the occupation from Rome. And the expectation was that's what Jesus was going to do. Now, the scriptures give a portrayal of what they call a concept, used to be a concept in Judaism, of two Messiahs, Messiah son of Joseph, Messiah son of David, where the Messiah son of David was the conquering king, the one who defeated Israel's armies and regathered the tribes of Israel and set up the Davidic kingdom. But there was the concept of Messiah son of Joseph, who would be lowly, humble, riding on a donkey. He would actually suffer on behalf of the nation of Israel. The fact of the matter is like the two concepts was actually Jesus's first coming and second coming. Messiah son of Joseph, the first coming, Messiah son of David, the second coming. So Jesus came here to deal with the sin problem before setting up any type of kingdom. He did offer the kingdom to the Jewish people. Had they been worthy and ready for it, he would have ushered it in. But of course, that was not the case. In the foreknowledge of God, he knew that was not going to happen. He knew that it was prophesied that the Messiah would have to suffer and die on behalf of the sins of the nation and for all the world in order to bring about salvation and to make an interchange in the human heart and the human life, and bring about the promised Holy Spirit, and so that people could be redeemed from the inside, and he can transform a people, get this people prepared so that they would be ready for a messianic kingdom. That's what the good news is, the news of the gospel, the new covenant, and things of that nature. But as time went on, as the followers of Jesus began to grow and had their message, the rabbis, which at the time, you could say the rabbis of today are in the tradition of the old Pharisees, and they have actually changed the concept of the Messiah and just He's just the one that's coming to, defeat the nations, protect Israel, gather the lost tribes, and set up the kingship. Nothing to do with the Messiah, son of Joseph concept. Interesting that they use Joseph, Messiah, son of Joseph concept, because Joseph, if you remember Joseph from Genesis, one of the children of Israel, Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers, and then he was kidnapped, sold, went into Egypt, ended up in Pharaoh's high court. Like, he had a high place. I'm not going to go through the whole story. But then there was a famine, and his brothers came down to Egypt to get food and everything. Nobody recognized him. Didn't even look like his siblings. And they thought he was Egyptian. And then he reveals himself to them, and they weep and they cry. And he ends up being the one to save them and rescue them from that famine and that hardship in that time. And that's kind of like what we'll have in the end of days when Jesus reveals himself, is revealed to them, and the scales come off the Jewish people's eyes to see who he is. It will be as if they saw Joseph, who was of them. He's one of you. You guys, Jesus is a Jew. It says that in John chapter 4. The woman at the well says, "How be you, being a Jew, speak to me, who's a Samaritan?" And Jesus never corrected her. And he had to be, because he had to come from David. So, but anyhow, they changed the concept of Messiah. So their concept of Messiah is just political, kingly, and it has nothing to do with the other prophecies of Messiah, namely, particularly Isaiah 53. And a lot of messianic prophecies have been reinterpreted, but they basically are, it's what the Pharisees became after the destruction of the temple, and they realized they had no temple, no way for atonement, no sacrifices. So the whole system of Judaism had to change. And the system of Judaism today is different than what it used to be. And even in Jesus' time, it was different than what it was when Moses was alive. Because the people heading toward tradition and ritualism, man-made laws, basically, or Torah, and things of that nature. And the rabbis have basically, I just want to say, corrupted it. I mean, even they were doing that in Jesus' days. You had the Sadducees who were linked in and buddy with the rich in Rome. So the whole they ran the temple, the sacrifice, the system was the Sadducees, and how corrupt they were and how they rubbed shoulders with Rome and things of that nature. But let me take a quick break, and we'll pick up back up where this left off. Okay. I don't know if you can see this. This is a book by Dr. Marvin Wilson, Our Father Abraham, Jewish Roots of the Christian Faith. Very good book if you want to know the history of Christianity and its roots. Chapter 5 is the chapter on quote unquote heretics and the synagogue. And there is a verse here that's quoted, John chapter 9, verse 22. Anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. All right. The Judaism of Jesus' day was far from monolithic. Giving a little background about the different sects here of Judaism in Jesus' day. It says a variety of sects had sprung up, each espousing a remedy for the malady of national despair. The Sadducees had a religious program that drew inspiration primarily from the temple. The Essenes had withdrawn to the wilderness near the Dead Sea to await a messianic intervention that will usher in the end of the age. And the sect of Nazarenes, followers of the way, who had Paul as their ringleader, Acts chapter 24, verse 5, Acts chapter 24, verse 14, had agitated the Jewish establishment with their reputation for causing trouble all over the world. Acts chapter 17, verse 6. During the first century, these and other Jewish parties vied for a hearing among the people. But the Jewish religious leadership eyed warily the Nazarenes in particular, for the Nazarenes were aggressive in their outreach and remained within the synagogue. Who are the Nazarenes? These are the followers of Jesus of Nazareth. Indeed, it was said that Jewish Christians filled Jerusalem with their teaching. Acts chapter 5, verse 28. In the previous chapter, we indicated that as the gap gradually widened between church and synagogue, hostility and persecution towards Jewish Christians also intensified. Hence, the Jewish authorities were increasingly concerned to warn people of the dangers that the Nazarenes and all other Jewish dissidents, sectarians, or who they called heretics, be eliminated from the mainstream of Jewish religious life. Accordingly, in this chapter, we will consider the first century malediction to exclude heretics from the synagogue and what relation, if any, this malediction has to the fourth gospel. The Birkat HaMinim definition. I'm not going to read this because this is going to get me off track. Talk about the Jewish revolts, put out of the synagogue. Just talking about the separation between the followers of Jesus from the synagogue. I don't know if you know, but if you read the book of Acts, they still went to synagogues. I wanted to get to the part where it talks about the Pharisees. Here we go. I'm on page 77. I think this is chapter 6. Chapter 6, the Jewish revolts and the parting of the way. So the Jews had a revolt between AD 66 and AD 73. There was a fanatic nationalism group and a drive to power. The Zealots, that was a sect of Judaism, were committed to end Roman rule and bring the salvation of God's elect people. In AD 66, when Eleazar the priest then appeared, apparently captain of the temple, stopped offering the daily sacrifice in behalf of the emperor's health, war became a reality. Though certain Jewish citizens sought to head off the revolt, it was too late. The Zealots had now moved into action. Their hope, victory, and political power for Israel. The war centered in Jerusalem and Judea and other areas of heavy Jewish population. The provinces of Idumea on the south, Perea in the east, and Galilee in the north. Vespasian had begun the Roman conquest in the north. In Galilee, he was met by Josephus, who had organized the Jewish revolt. After 3 years of conflict, in the year 69, Vespasian was recalled to Rome to become emperor. His son Titus took over. Jerusalem, which had been largely unscathed until this time, braced for attack. In AD 70, after several months of intense fighting, the holy precinct was taken and the temple destroyed. Soon the rest of the besieged city was in Roman hands. Tens of thousands of Jews were put to the sword, died of starvation, or were enslaved. Today in Rome, the famous Arch of Titus gives graphic witness to this event. It depicts the golden lampstand menorah from the temple in Jerusalem being carried away as booty to Rome. Let me show you that real quick here. Just give you a little historical lesson here, because I think this backdrop is the historical backdrop is kind of important to understand it, especially if you're not familiar with any of this information. I understand there may be believers and there may be non-believers who watch this. We were looking up the Arch of Titus. So this is it. This is the archer. I think this is on that front of that book from Galatians. The mystery of, or the irony of Galatians, I think. Mark Nanos. So here's, wish we could get a close up. Yeah, here they're carrying away the menorah from the temple, and it's being taken to Rome. For 3 years after the fall of Jerusalem, Rome continued its mopping up operation. Several Jewish strongholds yet remained. Masada being the last one to hold out. The isolated fortress of Masada, beautified decades earlier as a palace for the troubled Herod the Great, was located in the Judean wilderness overlooking the Dead Sea. On the top of Masada, 967 Jewish zealots had valiantly taken refuge, determined to hold out to the bitter end. With the 10th Roman Legion, several Silva besieged the fortress, finally storming it by means of huge man-made ramp on the west, and so forth, so forth. I don't have a lot of light in here, so brighten it up so I can read. All right. I'm going to skip this. Let's get to back to page 77 where I was going to start reading. The first Jewish revolt marked a turning point in the history of Judaism. The early church up to 70 CE, which is Common Era, it's just another way of saying AD. The early church was a daughter of Judaism. Only after that did it leave the nest. As we have stressed, however, the leaving was a process. It would not become finalized until well into the 2nd century. But the date of AD 70 basically marked the end of the Zealot, Sadducean, and Essene sects. Only the Pharisees and the struggling Nazarenes remained as parties in major contention. Another book you might want to read, I haven't started this, but Borderlines. This is by Daniel Boyarin. Borderlines, the partition of Judeo-Christianity. He is a very good he documents the partition of the way between Jews and Christians. Okay. Between revolts, the academy at Yavne. With the destruction of the temple, the priests and Pharisees, became entangled in disputes over questions of ritual. It now became the role of the Pharisees to begin an intensive restructuring of Judaism. Rituals of the temple were transferred to the home. Acts of kindness and charity began to replace atonement by sacrifice. Much of this comprehensive reformulation of Judaism by the Pharisees took place at an academy, Bet Midrash, at Yavne, or Jabne, or Jamnia, west of Jerusalem. The Sanhedrin, composed of the leading scribes, was transferred to Yavne. The first head of the academy was Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, who served until around the year 80 or 85. A student of the famous Hillel, Yohanan would be succeeded by Gamaliel II, mentioned earlier in regard to his request at Yavne for the composition of the Birkat HaMinim. Yohanan marked the start of a new era in the history of Judaism. When the Jewish people lost the very ground under its feet, Rabban Yohanan stepped into the breach, and by reformulating Judaism on a new basis, a spiritual instead of a territorial one, assured the millennial survival of the people and its faith. As founder of the academy, Yohanan initiated an ambitious agenda. In the academy, he sought to preserve Jewish tradition and to enhance unity among various divisions. At the time around the Pharisees, the schools of Hillel and Shammai had considerable differences to iron out. Thus, Yohanan sought to effect a greater unification in the interpretation of the law. The pluralism within Jewry prior to the fall of Jerusalem was no longer possible. In other words, they couldn't have different sects. They had to be unified. Couldn't have this sect and this other sect. They saw that everybody had to be unified. So in addition, the need for codification of the oral law became apparent at Yavne, though no tangible realization of this need would be finalized until the Mishnah was compiled under the direction of Rabbi Judah the Prince more than a century later. The sages at Yavne were also responsible for reworking the temple ritual so as to standardize it into the order and liturgy of the synagogue service. Furthermore, they discussed and settled questions concerning the canonicity of certain Old Testament books. The books of the Apocrypha were now apparently clearly distinguished from the Holy Writ, and in the opinion of certain scholars, considerable work toward the finalizing of the official text of the Hebrew Bible, the Masorah, was carried on. Also, at Yavne, the division of the Old Testament into law, prophets, and writings was first clearly attested. However, Jesus does make that distinction himself. Jesus himself makes that distinction, and I close. Go back to logos here. Hopefully it opens up quicker this time. We're going to go to the book of Luke. Let's close that. Okay. On the road to Emmaus, Luke chapter 24. Behold, two of them were going that very day to a village named Emmaus, which was about this is after the resurrection of Jesus, okay? And before his ascension into heaven, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things which had taken place. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them. But their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are these words that you are exchanging with one another as you're walking?" They stood still, looking sad. One of them, named Cleophas, answered and said to him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem and unaware of the things which have happened here in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to him, "The things about Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word in the sight of God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him." Notice that they specify in here who did this. It wasn't just it wasn't the nation of it. It wasn't the Jewish people. It was particularly those within the Jewish people who were the chief priests and rulers. The Sanhedrin, the chief priests and Sanhedrin, they delivered him to the sentence of death and crucified him. And then the mob. There was a big mob out there as well. And they all shouted like, I mean, we all know death be upon us and upon our children. But this, not the whole nation. Jesus had followers of the nation of the Jews. But the sentences, it's held on to the chief priests and the rulers. But they represent the people. You know, they're representative of them. It's almost like Congress is representative of us. You know, what they do and what our president does is representative of the American people, even though the American people may object to what's being done. But we are hoping that it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, it is the third day since these things happened. But also some women among us amazed us when they were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. They came saying that they had also seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just exactly as the women also had said, but him they did not see. He said to them, O foolish men and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for the Christ, or the Messiah, to suffer these things and to enter into his glory? Christ comes from the Greek word Christos. Christos is used in Greek because Messiah doesn't you translate words for what they mean. Christos in Greek means anointed one. So they use in Greek Christos, and since the New Testament manuscripts that we have were in Greek, they use Christos instead of Moshiach because we don't have original, well, I shouldn't even say, we don't have the manuscripts dating back far enough or anything that comes from that time that shows that they were originally in Hebrew, although they were thought to have been possibly originally written in Hebrew or in Aramaic. What we do have is Greek. We do have some Hebrew manuscripts, but they appear to be Hebrew manuscripts that were translated from the Greek into Hebrew. I don't think there's any like Hebrew source manuscripts that have been discovered. Then beginning with Moses or the law, this is what that is meant by beginning with Moses. It's talking about the law, the Torah, first 5 books of the Bible, and with all the prophets, the Nevi'im. So the prophets and the law is mentioned here as part of the scriptures. There is also, we can go to, what does the Bible talk about John the Baptist? I think it's the Gospel of John. Mark chapter 9, verses, start at verse 2. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and brought them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his garments were radiant and exceedingly white, as no launderer on earth can whiten them. Eliyahu, appeared to them along with Moses. So here we have Eliyahu or Elijah representing the prophets appearing alongside with Moses, representing the Torah, the law. And they were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Let's pause for a second here. 2 times people went up on a mount and said, in the scripture, in the Old Testament, and the scripture says that they saw God. Who was it? It was Moses and it was Elijah. Who happens to be here at the time Jesus is transfigured? Moses and Elijah, and it's up on a high mountain. For he did not know what to answer, for they became terrified. Then a cloud formed, overshadowing them, and a voice came out of the cloud. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. What did the Father say earlier? If we go back to when he was baptized of John, when he's baptized of John, in those days, Jesus came from Nazareth. This is Mark 1, chapter 1, verse 9. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Immediately coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens opening and the Spirit like a dove descending upon him, and a voice came out of the heavens, "You are my beloved Son." So we can connect the two verses, the transfiguration and the baptism of Jesus, because both times the voice from heaven says, "You're my beloved Son." Here he says, "In you I am well pleased." What he said at the transfiguration, it says, "You are my beloved Son, listen to him." Or, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." Where does this, where's this? There's a connection to this, and that is the Psalms. So let's go to Psalm chapter. I don't want this to be a new tab. Psalm 2. Now the Psalms, this is a book. I need a Bible. All right, we gotta go to Psalm 2. Why are the nations in uproar? He said to me, "You are my son. Today I have begotten you." It's quoted in the book of Hebrews in regards to Jesus. Hebrews chapter 1. For the which of the angels, okay, God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets in many portions and in many ways in these last days, has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the world. He is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purifications of sin, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high, having become as much better than the angels as he has attained a more excellent name than they. For to which of the angels did he ever say, "You are my son, today I have begotten you"? And again, "I will be father to him, and he shall be to me a son." When he again brings the firstborn into the world, he says, "And let all the angels of God worship him." And all the angels, he says, "Who makes his angels winds and his ministers a fire of flame." But to the Son, he says, so he's making a contrast between the Son and the angels as having been made much more better than them. And it quotes the Psalms chapter 2 verse. "You are my son, today I've begotten you." He's never said that to any angels. The conclusion you draw that is that he has said that about his son. So Psalm 2, chapter 2, is where we get this, "You are my son, today I've begotten you." Psalms is the biggest portion of the Ketuvim, the writings. And we're talking about the Ketuvim. I'm talking about, let's just pull up a definition for those. The Ketuvim. Ketuvim, the Hebrew scriptures, is the name of the third section of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, which simply means writing. Now, Tanakh is usually capitalized with the N and then the K. T for Torah, the N for Nevi'im, the K for the Ketuvim, the writings, the law, prophets, and the writings, which hardly do justice to the variety of religious expression found there. But the largest book of the writings is the Psalms. So we have a quote from the Father 2 times quoting Psalms, chapter 2. All right. Then if we go back to Mark, it says, "In you I am well pleased." This is a quote from Isaiah. Isaiah 52. Ba, 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 ba. But the Lord was pleased to crush him, putting him. I don't know if this is the verse. Isaiah 42:1. Behold my servant, yep, whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth, who my soul delights in who he is my chosen one. I am pleased with him. So this is from the prophet, the section of the threefold division of the Bible, which is the prophets, Isaiah being the one that's quoted here. We could pull up, I was using the New American Standard Bible version here, what I was actually using. Behold my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one, in whom my soul delights, in whom I'm well pleased. So the Father quotes the voice from heaven, who is believed to be the Father, God the Father. Who else would be talking from heaven? Isaiah 42, verse 1, in whom I'm well pleased, connecting that prophecy. And then the last one is the one we found at the Transfiguration. And here he says, listen to him. And this comes from Deuteronomy 18. The Lord your God will raise up for, and this is Moses speaking, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your countrymen. You shall listen to him. This is according to all that you asked of the Lord your God in Horeb on the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God. Let me not see this great fire anymore, or I will die. The Lord said to me, they have spoken well. I will raise up a prophet from among their countrymen like you, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whosoever will not listen to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I myself will require of that man. So here we have a connection to Deuteronomy, which is the law. So what we have established here with the voice from heaven and its proclamation of Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Son of God, is that this is God's Son. So the Psalms, the writings, the connection to that division of the scriptures. You must listen to him. We have the Torah, the law, Deuteronomy, connection to that division of scriptures. And we have whom I'm well pleased, Isaiah, the connection to the prophets. So that connection. So we have the law, we have the prophets, and we have the writing. I brought that all up because we were talking here about the codification of the Old Testament. That was the only reason why I even mentioned this. We were talking about that in this book. Books of the Apocrypha were now apparently clearly distinguished from the Holy Writ, and in the opinion of certain scholars, considerable work toward the finalization of the official text of the Hebrew Bible, the Masorah, was carried on. Also, Yavne, the division of the Old Testament into law, prophets, and writings was first clearly attested. But as we see from the New Testament, I mean, that's what we could see that connection as well in the New Testament scriptures, in the Gospels themselves. The importance of Yavne in the history of the Jewish people can hardly be overestimated. The emergence of Rabbinic Judaism may be traced to Yavne. Through ordination, which is Simcha, the laying on of hands, of the disciples of Yochanan ben Zakkai, the title rabbi acquired new significance. Yavne marks the setting in motion of a succession of sages or rabbis through formal ordination. So this is the first time they start doing like formal ordination. Previously, rabbi just meant teacher, but now it's an ordained position that had emerged under this new rabbinic Judaism. Here, the meaning of rabbi must be carefully contrasted with the use of the term in the New Testament, where it was an informal term of honor bestowed on a learned teacher, and hence primarily an esteemed form of address. Now, Jesus didn't want his disciples being referred to that because he was their rabbi. He reserved the term of honor and bestowment. As noted in chapter 5 above, at Yavne, the Birkat Hameen, the heretic benediction, was composed. This composition underscores the scholars of Yavne were interested in protecting and preserving Judaism from all its foes, both inside and out. But this attitude did not mean that Yavne established any official policy against Christians. Rather, the cursing of the heretics was in essence a renewed call to vigilance about Jewish survival. It was to awaken the collective consciousness of Jewry, not simply to the growth of Christians in its midst, but also to the existence of sectarians, detractors, and defectors of any stripe. During the years following the first and second Jewish revolts, the Jewish Christians and traditional Jews continued to exchange bitter accusations. Gentiles who entered the church, unlike proselytes who entered Judaism, did not have to deal with the barrier of adult circumcision and other regulations of Jewish law. Hence, many political proselytes found it more attractive to join the church rather than the synagogue. To compound the tension further, the growth of Gentiles within the Jewish church To compound the tension further, the growth of Gentiles within the Jewish church compromised the Jewish position in the mind of the rabbis. After the apostles died, the next generation of leaders was mostly Gentile, especially in the great centers of Christian growth, which included Antioch and Rome. The church had begun within Judaism as an all-Jewish sect, but by the early part of the 2nd century, its adherents, especially in the diaspora, were predominantly non-Jews. So that discusses how rabbinic Judaism came about. It also talks about separation church and synagogue, and how the Gentiles begin to take over. And it goes, and that's when changes begin to go. Sabbath to the Lord's Day, Passover to Easter. I'm going to pull up something real quick here. If you want to learn a little bit more about history, I recommend getting Dr. Marvin R. Wilson's book, Our Father Abraham, Jewish Roots of the Christian Faith, and then getting Dr. Daniel Oyarin's book, Borderlines, The Partition of Judeo-Christianity. You'll learn a lot. Excuse me, making a mess here. Let's go here. I have a playlist. Where is it at? Oh, that's subscriptions. Sorry.
The followers of Jesus didn't call means a sect,
You
but
will
promises
learn
of
a
God to
lot
Israel.
in
And
this here. Where's the other video?
the followers of Jesus didn't call themselves Christians. That name came later, and not from them. Jewish
Christianity
identity was no longer
without
central
Rome.
to Christian self-understanding, reinterpreted,
What would it
and
look
martyrdom.
like?
After Constantine,
So let's say church and synagogue separation hadn't happened, and then this whole expansion under Rome wasn't that way. What would it look like? I think you would want to watch this video. This will open your eyes a lot. This would open your eyes a lot. Prophet 33, he wears a mask. He said he would be, I'll just let you. He said he would be, my name is Prophet 33.
and I bring you the word of God. The reason I wear a mask is because I am persecuted in my country for my faith. This mask protects my life. Let's continue.
It's kind of weird. It gives me like the anonymous feel, but I don't know why he calls himself Prophet 33, but I would watch this video too. That's another one I recommend. All right, now let's get back to what we were originally on, which was this video.
So what this is, I'll explain later on, okay? But I want you to be aware of this, who these people are. Rabbi Sneerson is very important for our story. And Netanyahu, of course, is the current Prime Minister of Israel. All right, let's continue.
Just backtracking, because a lot of time has expired and this video has been edited. We were discussing messianic expectations, who this guy perceived to be as Messiah and all this other stuff. And somehow I got off topic a little bit, but this is back to Netanyahu's motivations. And I think it has to do with this meeting with Rabbi Menachem Sneerson. Okay.
All right.
We want to know what you're reading now.
What I'm reading?
Yeah.
It's called The Jews Against Rome.
What made you pick it up?
Well, we lost that one. I think we have to win the next one.
We want to know what you're reading now.
Okay. All right. So that's a very quick exchange, okay? So a journalist is asking Benjamin Netanyahu, what book are you reading now? And he says, Rome versus the Jews. It's a book by Barry Strauss, a historian. And it goes on about the 3 wars that the Jews fought against the Romans. And it was essentially a Holocaust for the Jews. A lot of Jews either died or were enslaved. The Romans burned down the Second Temple. So there's this historical animosity of the Jews against the Romans. Okay? But what he said is, what Benjamin Netanyahu said is that I'm reading this book because we lost that war against Rome. But in the next war against Rome, we must not lose. The question then is, who's Rome? It's not Iran, guys. It's probably not Russia. It's probably America, right? The great empire. So this is...
I didn't want to believe this. And he's probably right. I mean, who else could it be? We have similarities to Rome. Just look at the eagle on the back of the dollar, and not the dollar. The back of the 25-cent coin, and things like that. Roman pillars. We have the fasces in our Congress. Things of that nature. Our like system, like the Senate and things of that nature, modeled after Rome. It could be right. Another colleague of mine sent me a Instagram post, and it was a quote saying that Netanyahu said this about America, couldn't stand us. And I was like, anybody can make a quote like that. Where's the source? And I know there's a lot of anti-Semitism just to be anti-Semitism. So a lot of times I kind of chuck a lot of that stuff up to that, but he could have very well said that. He could have very well said that. I mean, like, the chief priest and the rulers of Israel offered up the Messiah too. Why wouldn't they do it for the USA? I mean, they did it to the Son of God. Doesn't surprise me.
Strange because Israel is the ally of America in this war. But Netanyahu is saying that, no, our real enemy is Rome. And that's what we must prepare for, okay? So I want you guys to keep this in mind. All right, this is Peter Hegseth, who is the Secretary of War for Donald Trump, okay? And this is the year about 2018, where he is in Jerusalem, and he's talking to Christian Zionists, okay? Who these people are, I'll explain later on, okay? But let's listen to his speech really quickly.
And I and others had a chance to go see the Western Wall of the Temple Mount, the Western Wall tunnels, so much of the old city. And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you. And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle, 1948 was a miracle, 1967 was a miracle, 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle, and there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible.
So, independent journalist Jonathan, where's his name? Jonathan Larson reported last Saturday morning through Monday night, more than 110 complaints were made to the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. The complaints came from more than 40 different units spread across at least 30 military installations. One non-commissioned officer said they were Christian and had emailed the MRFF on behalf of 15 troops, including at least 11 Christians, 1 Muslim, and 1 Jew. They wrote to the MRFF that their commander, quote, urged us to tell our troops that this was all part of God's divine plan, end quote. And he specifically referenced numerous citations out of the book of Revelation referring to Armageddon and the imminent return of Jesus Christ. Hexeth. Now, there is a photo of Hexeth and his tattoo, and there is something to do with this. Now, when they're rallying up, like ICE and all these people are rallying up gang members because of tattoos, because they say that stuff means something, you got to also understand that stuff, look at that tattoo on his chest. If they're telling you that someone's tattoos indicate they're in some type of gang or in some type of a group, then you got to say, turn her back around, and then turn it back around on him, and this is the same thing. This is from his Instagram page, including the Crusader cross on his chest and Dias Volt on his bicep. The Chi Rho symbol, Crusader cross. So, as with so many old symbols and many belief systems, there are various ways of reading its meaning. Some say the 4 smaller crosses represent the 4 Gospels of the New Testament, with the bigger cross, the cross of the crucifixion itself. Or it can instead be described as 5 crosses, as George V wrote to his mother, which evokes the 5 words of Christ on the cross. Other readings make it a symbol of evangelism, representing the spread of the gospel. It has similarly been reappropriated by different groups through the centuries since its earliest usage, which was during the Crusades. It became one of the symbols of the Franciscans, a Christian monastic order that was founded over a century after the capture of Jerusalem. In 1209, it now has custodianship over holy places in Jerusalem and the Holy Land on behalf of the Catholic Church, making it also the symbol of the city itself. This in turn meant that Christian pilgrims to the Holy Land, from future kings to bishops to more humble pilgrims, have traveled home with this permanent surveyor of the trip on their arm, showing on the meaning of going on a crusade. In other words, the Jerusalem cross can be read with a militant or non-militant meaning. Where Hexeth deviates quite significantly from the pilgrims is in the size of his tattoo. It's interesting it's so large, says Matt Lotter, a senior lecturer in art history and theory and director of American Studies at the University of Essex, and an expert on the Jerusalem pilgrim tattoos. In Jerusalem, you're looking at a 20-minute job. His is hours and hours and hours of tattooing. This is a statement in itself. Sometimes the more seditious symbols are sort of hidden away, more plausibly deniable, but this isn't hit as supposed to be hidden. The Chai Ro, let me see if this will pronounce it for me. Open and read now. Has a similarly layered set of meanings for many. The Christogram is uncontroversial, akin to the Alpha and Omega that adorn so many churches, which refers to the description of Jesus in the book of Revelation as those 2 letters, the first and the last of the Greek alphabet, meaning Christ is the beginning and the end. Anyways, there's some connection to the Crusades here. If you learn about the Crusades, you can just do your little brushing up of history on that, but that's kind of interesting. Hexeth defends tattoos with alleged connection to extremists.
An hours-long grilling for arguably President-elect.
I didn't even know that was brought up in his confirmation hearing. I'll have to watch this. I'm not going to pull that out right now. It's going to take me off track. Let's get back on track.
Okay, so he is a Christian. He's not a Jew. But what he's saying is that he's come to Jerusalem and he's visited these Jewish holy sites. And he can't help be amazed, be awed by the beauty, the spirituality of the Western Wall. He also goes on to say that there's been a series of miracles, okay? So 1917 was the Balfour Declaration, when basically the British Empire permitted the Jews to found the nation-state of Israel. 1948 was when Israel was founded. 1967 was when when Israel fought a war against its Arab neighbors and won. Okay, and 2017 was when Donald Trump transferred the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, thus recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And what he's saying is that, well, if this is a series of steps to achieving a divine plan, then the next miracle should be the rebuilding of Solomon's temple, the third temple, and that means destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay? So what's going on here? Okay, again, I'll explain to you later on, but I want you to be aware of who these people are and how they think. All right, let's go one more video. And so if you want to build Solomon's temple, if you want to build the third temple, you need to get rid of the third holiest site in the Islamic world. And how do you do that? Well, there are some options, okay? So
missiles will hit the mosque and clear the place for the third Bet HaMikdash. That could also be a miracle. If it was up to me, the last time when they shot hundreds of missiles, I would pretend that one missile came from Iran and shoot it down. You know, then all the Arabs will go against Iran, it will be the end of the problems. You make them fight with each other, this bunch of lunatics. Never too late, you deal with a bunch of cowards.
Okay, so this is a rabbi in Israel, and he's saying how last year during the 12-day war in June, Iran was firing missiles at Israel. And what he's saying is, you know, that was an opportunity for us to pretend that Iranian missile hit the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, thus destroying it. And then the Arabs will blame the Iranians, and the Arabs will go to war against the Persians. And then we can just sit back and laugh at these lunatics. Okay? So, again, this may be confusing to you as to who these people are, why they are saying these things. All right? But now what I'm going to do is explain to you what is really going on. Okay? And I keep on saying this, but it is hard from a geopolitical perspective to explain this US-Iran war. You have to look at the religious perspective, okay? The religious angle, and that's what I want to focus on today. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so again, this is the three holiest site in the Islamic world. This is Saudi Arabia, Mecca, Medina, and this is the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is where Muhammad was supposed to ascend to heaven. And the Jews and the Christian Zionists believe that this must be destroyed so that they can build the third temple, or Solomon's temple. Okay? All right.
I believe in Bible prophecy, and if you do too, you know that there will be another temple built, as the scriptures foretell the Antichrist setting up himself. He sits in it says in the temple of God, declaring himself to be God by actually sitting there. So we know that there is a defilement of the temple that takes place during the period called the time of Jacob's trouble, or the tribulation period. There is actually a temple, and the Antichrist will go in there and do what he does. Talk about, it's foreshadowed in Daniel chapter 9. Also in 1 Thessalonians 4. 1 Thessalonians 4, I believe it is. There was a foreshadowing of this with Antiochus Epiphanes, who defiled the first temple, I believe it was, or the second temple, the first temple, and he offered up or sacrificed a pig on the altar in the temple, thus defiling the temple. So there was a partial fulfillment of that. but there's also one to come. We know that's going to take place. There's going to be another temple.
So this is the big question in this war. And again, I keep on saying this, but I need to be right in my prediction if my analysis is to be correct. If they do not destroy the Alexei Moss, and if they are able to achieve peace, then my predictive model, my analysis is completely wrong, and you just ignore me, okay, for the rest of my life. And I can go back to teaching, great books or something. All right, so let us examine.
I like the way he presents that.
Why this is important, okay? So today I want to introduce you to a new theory of game theory called the law of eschatological convergence. Okay, so this is a very hard thing to write down, okay? It sounds complicated, but it's not, okay? Eschatology, what it is a story of how the world ends. And it's very it's very compelling for people because, remember, we discussed this last semester, but as human beings, we have 3 questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? And eschatology provides a story that answers all 3 questions. Why God created us, what our mission on earth is, and what God has planned for the end of the world. Okay? And different traditions will have different eschatologies. And what's important to figure out is, in what aspect do these eschatologies converge? Okay, converge, meaning a union of these eschatologies. And why is that important? Because it allows you to predict how they will behave. Think of a story as the operating system of a society. And as such, it's a script that they will act out. And if you're able to figure out the different scripts and see how they converge together, where the union of these different scripts are, then you can actually predict how the world will turn out. Okay? All right. So having explained the law, I'm going to go into some theory to help us understand why this works. Okay? All right. So the first thing to understand is something called the universal law of game theory. Okay? And the universal law of game theory states this. Whoever wins a game is able to do this, okay? Mass times energy times coordination. Okay? So these are the 3 things you want to look at to understand how well a player would do in a game. So mass is just the number of people involved on the team, okay? Energy is just how much attention, focus, motivation there is, okay? So think of it as attention or motivation or action, okay? Any of these words will do. But basically, how invested are you in winning the game? And how hard are you willing to work to win the game? And coordination is just the idea of synchronicity. And what I mean by that is, how well do the teammates work together? Okay? And something that you need to appreciate is that the most important thing in winning a game is actually coordination. In fact, I would say it's 4 times more important than just mass. So you can have a lot of people, but if they don't work well together, you're defeated by another team with few people, but they work well together, okay? And then energy is twice as important as mass. All right? So let me give you an example. Let's just say that you're playing a game by yourself. Okay, maybe for example, you enter a ping pong competition or a chess competition. Well, mass and coordination don't really matter because you don't have any teammates. And so what matters is energy, how motivated you are to win this game. How much time do you put in practice? How much time do you put into studying and improving yourself? How focused are you in winning, okay? All right, so a team sport, well, mass is constant. And so what matters is energy and coordination, how well the team works well together, okay? Now, what's interesting is that there are different ways to improve or increase, augment the energy and coordination, all right? So maybe a leader. Okay, so maybe if someone is a really inspiring leader, that will make people much more motivated, and that will allow them to work well together because all they have to do is listen to a leader. Okay? The problem with a leader, of course, is that eventually he will die. All right? Then you have a family, okay, blood. Okay? They work well together because they all share similar blood. But we cannot account for the differences within this family, okay, the conflict within this family, right? So historically, in the long term, the force that allows teams to beat other teams is the idea of narrative, okay? Narrative, or a story. Okay, why? Because it implants in the minds of all those who believe in the narrative a series of actions that they must take in order to win the game. Okay? So think of it as a script. And in a script, you know what part you play, so you just have to act it out. And that allows for you all to work together to achieve the outcome that you desire. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? And in narrative, the most powerful form of narrative is the idea of eschatology. Because eschatology is a complete script. A complete script in which everyone knows what he or she must do in order to achieve the desired outcome. And eschatology also is able to transcend both time and space.
Have we defined eschatology? I don't think we did. Eschatology is the theological study of the last things: death, judgment, heaven, hell, and the final destiny of humanity and the cosmos. In a Judeo-Christian view, that history has a beginning and an end, unlike cyclical views found in other belief systems. The second coming, the belief that Jesus Christ will return to earth, a central tenet for Christians. Judgment and restoration, the final reckoning for humanity and ultimate renewal of creation into a new heaven and a new earth. Prophetic fulfillment, the interpretation of biblical, particularly revelatory prophecies regarding the tribulation, the Antichrist, and the kingdom of God. Common interpretations and views. You have the premillennialism view, the amillennialism view, and the postmillennialism view. Sorry. Eschatology, from ancient Greek eschatos, last, and ology, concerns expectations of the end of the present age, human history, or the world itself. End of the world or end times is predicted by several world religions, both Abrahamic and Indian, which teach that negative world events will reach a climax. Now, in the Greek, though, the word for world in age, it's aeon, A-E-O-N. They mean the same thing. Greek aeon, or eon, originally meant life, vital force, or being, generation, or a period of time, though it tended to be translated as age in the sense of ages, forever, timeless, or for eternity. It is a Latin transliteration from the ancient Greek word aion, from the archaic, I don't know how to pronounce that, meaning century. In Greek, it literally refers to the time span of 100 years. A cognate Latin word, don't know how to pronounce that either, for age is present in both words such as eternal, longevity, and medieval. So while Christianity does not actually teach end of the world, it teaches end of the age. And then the new age would be the messianic age, followed by the new heavens and the new earth. Keeping in mind, though, that new in the Old Testament Hebrew and renewed, sometimes the same word. So it may not actually be a brand new physical world or brand new physical heavens. It could be a renewal and a renewing of things. Kind of like the term new covenant. In its sense, the word used for new is renewed. Okay.
Meaning that you can actually spend centuries acting out the script because everyone knows his role anyway, okay? And it can transcend borders as well. You can go beyond ethnic identity and family, okay? So the most powerful mechanism in history is eschatology, right? So what is eschatology? All right, so most religions are similar. Most religions require you to be a good person. Be humble, be kind, be generous. But there are certain aspects of religions that are extreme, okay? And we can call them eschatologies. Okay? So the classic example is the Jewish religion. Okay? In the Jewish religion, if you're what you believe is that you no longer live in Israel because a long time ago, the Israelites pissed off God by disobeying him. God told the Israelites, do not worship false idols. But the Israelites sinned, they disobeyed, so they were kicked out of Jerusalem. And they were forced to wander the earth in the diaspora for centuries. And so what they believe is that they each need to engage in an act of redemption, of humility, of submission, of piety to God if they are to redeem the whole Jewish people. Okay? And when that happens, when they recognize their own limitations, when they recognize how inferior they are to God and submit to God, then God will send the Messiah to redeem them and lead them back to Jerusalem, defeat the enemies of the Jews, bring all the Jews from the diaspora back to Jerusalem, unify the Jewish people, and then build the third temple so that God can come to earth and live with all the Jews and create heaven on earth, okay? That is the Jewish religion that most Jews believe. Okay, like there are a lot of differences, okay, but I'm just trying to simplify it for clarity, okay? But then you have these extremes, fanatics.
We also got to remember how the council at Yavne, where the Pharisees gathered east of Jerusalem, redefined a lot of definitions of the Jewish religion, like the concept of Messiah. They recodified the concept of God. You know, in first century Judaism, they had this concept of the two powers in heaven. I want to diverge into all that, but a lot of those concepts were then claimed to be heretical because, and that was this, they did those things in basically to contest with the Christian faith, because the Christians believe that Jesus was within the echad of God, the oneness of God, God's oneness, that Jesus had become within, he was within that oneness of God. Okay.
Who have a different eschatology, okay? And these people we're gonna say are accelerationists. And their point is that this is fine, but it's way too slow. And it dissolves us of individual responsibility. If you have faith in God, then you should want to hurry things up and force the return of God as soon as possible. And you do that by recognizing that if you actually, before the Messiah comes, if you actually go and create the nations of Israel, bring all the Jews back, build the third temple, defeat all the enemies, then the Messiah will come naturally. Okay? And so, of course, most Jews hear this and they think that this is blasphemy, it's heresy. Because you are defying the will of God. You think you can manipulate God into action. That is wrong. That is the opposite of redemption. That is the worst possible sin you can make.
That's why we cannot hold the nation of Israel accountable for the things that the leaders in Israel are doing. If the leaders there, such as Netanyahu, are doing things to manipulate the coming of the Mashiach, they don't agree with it. We got to be careful of we have to make that distinction between Netanyahu and others and religious leaders who think that they can hasten the coming of the Messiah. Now, ultimately, who they believe the Messiah is, whoever it is, if there is a Messiah figure that comes up, it's not going to be Jesus until the tribulation period is ended and the scales come off their eyes. Right now, Israel has been hardened and their eyes have been blinded. Romans chapters 9 through 11, I would recommend reading that on the blinding and hardening of Israel till the fullness of the Gentiles come in. But a lot of people think that, let me just put my face back on screen here. A lot of people think that the Antichrist is going to be a Jew because Jesus had said in the Gospel of John that I am come in my Father's name and you don't receive me. If another comes in his own name, him you will receive. So they would follow a false Messiah, which they've already done. They've done it with Bar Kokhba. They've done that with, I think they thought Judah Maccabee was the Messiah too. That was the intertestamental, but that was before Jesus, before Jesus' ministry on earth. There was another messianic figure in, I think, 120 AD. It doesn't say, though, anywhere in Scripture that the false Messiah and the anti-Christ, anti-Messiah, are necessarily the same thing. The way the Old Testament prophets depict the anti-Messiah is he's the one that gathers the predominantly Muslim nations together to come against Jerusalem, to come against Israel. So it kind of seems like the prophets depict a person who is Muslim versus someone that the Jews would pick. The Jews wouldn't pick a Messiah, someone coming from Islam. He would be from David's throne. He would be a Jew. He would worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In that regard, that type of tradition. So you'll have to watch. I kind of recommend Joel Richardson, his YouTube channel. Maybe pick up his book Mideast Beast, and he actually has a video. Go to Joel Richardson. You could watch. That's on Mystery Babylon. to his playlist.
Hey guys, welcome back.
He deals with a lot about Bible prophecy. So that's a 2-part playlist. That's not the playlist. I don't even need the whole playlist. I just need there's a video. I would know because it's big old symbol on it. Because it's about the Antichrist, so he makes it look like really demonic looking backdrop for the cover photo for the video to depict the Antichrist. Where is this one? Oh, I guess it's not that one. What was the one that I saw? These are all is a Jewish Antichrist. These are all Jewish Antichrist I would watch. That's from 5 years ago. The Antichrist. The remnant and when all of Israel will be saved. Romans chapter 11. Daniel's 4 beasts. The gospel in Daniel 7. The little horn, which is about the Antichrist. The rice of the little horn. The ram and goat. Daniel 8. Mark of the beast. Daniel's vision of the 70 weeks. Skip the COVID one. Part 2 of Daniel. Will the Antichrist be a false Jewish Messiah? Is Jerusalem mystery Babylon? Isaiah 19, end times prophecy. The Antichrist defeats Egypt. Antichrist invades Jerusalem. Jesus destroys the Antichrist. The 7 seals of Revelation. I would watch all of those, including his sit-down interview with Israel's coming covenant with the Antichrist. The Antichrist would be, you watch these two as well. His sit down here with Vlad Savchuk, who's he's Ukrainian. He's a believer. Joe Richardson is too. And watch that about the scriptural case for an Islamic Antichrist. So we're not Islamophobes. We have to present the gospel to people who believe in that. But yeah, he even has the book. You can get the audio book as well. I recommend his material a lot. I highly recommend Joe Richardson for that. All right, let's get back to this. We're almost at the halfway point. I'm going to try to let him do more talking, okay? Less interruptions.
Okay? And so this eschatology is considered a fringe, an extreme, something to be ignored. The problem, though, is that if you think about it, what an eschatology really is doing is creating a vector to force the religion to move in a certain direction. Okay? And also, if you think about it, if this is the case where eschatology is a vector that forces the mainstream to move in a certain direction, then whichever eschatology is the most extreme, the most violent, will be the one that wins out. Okay? Okay, does that make sense? In other words, what we're going to do today is look at the most extreme versions of different eschatologies. Because, quite honestly, even though these extreme versions are shared by only a few people, they're the ones who are working the hardest to achieve their eschatology, and therefore they're forcing the religion they are in to move a certain way. Okay? All right. So, you hear this and you think this is all confusing, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you a passage from a biography of Rabbi Sneerson. Remember, we had a look at Rabbi Sneerson talking to Netanyahu and saying, hurry up, let's hurry up the return of the Messiah, okay? He is in charge of Shabbat Lubavitch, which again is an extreme eschatology, but again, because they are so extreme, they're willing to work as hard as possible to achieve their vision, and therefore they are forcing the Jewish mainstream in a certain direction. Okay? All right, so this is a biography of Rabbi Schneerson. And the Shabbat Lubavitch movement was founded in modern-day Belarus, and over time it went over to America because it suffered a lot of persecution by the Russians. And today they are a global movement, and they are powerful in Russia, in America, and in Israel. Okay? So we will discuss the Shabbat Lubavitch as we move along, but I want to, with this passage, show you how coordination among eschatologists work, okay? All right? So the year is 1939. And the Nazis, Nazi Germany, again, who are anti-Semitic, they hate Jews, they want all Jews out of Europe, they are overrunning Europe. And by 1939, they have conquered Poland, Warsaw, okay? Now, Poland, Warsaw is where the head rabbi, the Rebbe of the Shabbat Lubavitch movement is. And his name is Yosef Yetzat, okay? And he's the father-in-law of Rabbi Schneerson. And he's an old man, and he's in Warsaw, and the Nazis are overrunning the city. So his followers in America are want to save his life, okay? So then the question then is like, but how do you do that? Because America and Germany are not best friends. The war is breaking out in Europe, and Yosef Yewitz is a very old man. And there are no planes, well, there are planes, but there are no commercial air flights that you can take, okay? So it's gonna be a very long, arduous journey across many borders. Plus, he will need a visa, not just for himself, but for his whole family, okay? Now what I'll show you is how powerful these people are. And again, this is an eschatology where they all share similar vision, and therefore they're willing to make the necessary sacrifices in order to help each other achieve this vision, okay? All right, so this is from the biography. In an ocean away in America, Yosef Yezuit's followers were mounting a rescue effort. With the help of Stan Kramer, an Orthodox attorney, the son of Lubavitch immigrants, the Shabbat activist Israel Jacobson hired Max Road, a politically connected lawyer, to secure American visas for Yosef Yewitz and his family, okay? So, in other words, even though there may not be that many followers, they have a wide political circle. And a lot of the reason why is that they pool their resources together. And when they pull their resources together, they're able to invest in real estate together, they're able to invest in business together, and they're able to generate a lot of money, which they can then use to influence politics in America, okay? They can buy out politicians, they can do a lot of things. Okay, so the first part is easy, getting visas for the rabbi and his family. Now the problem is, how do you actually get to him, okay? Because there are no telephones, there's no internet, there are no airplanes. How do you find him when there's a war going on in Poland, when there are Nazis everywhere? Okay, all right, let's continue. Yosef Yewitz's followers also reached out to Attorney General Benjamin Cohen, okay? And Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, okay? This man is very important. He's what we call a Sabbatine Francus. What I'll show you later on is that Sabbatine Francus and the Shabbat Lubavitch movement are very much aligned. Okay, so even though they're not part of the same movement, they are sympathetic towards each other. And he's the most powerful Jew in America at this time, okay, in the 1930s, 40s, whom Yosef Yewitz had met during his fundraising trip of 1929. The Lubavitch efforts in America were successful, all right? So they've won over the Americans. They've won over the entire American political apparatus, and they are dedicated to helping the rabbi escape Europe and come to America. All right? Now the second part is, how do you deal with the Nazis? Okay, the Lubavitch's efforts in America were successful. On October 2nd, Cohen wrote to Robert Pell, a senior official in the State Department, asking for help. The next day, Pell contacted Helmut Waldhardt, a German and a member of the Nazi Party, a Nazi, who specialized in national industry and economics to see if he would be willing to save one of the leading Jewish scholars in the world. Okay? This is a guy, American, writing to a Nazi and saying, hey man, I know you're a Nazi, but we need your help to save a Jew. And the guy says, yes. Okay? Waldhardt was strategically chosen. He had studied at Columbia University in the early 1930s and had forged a relationship with Pell after the Evian Conference on Jewish Refugees in 1938. Seeing an opportunity to curry goodwill of the United States.
Oh, we're not just going to overlook that. That's interesting. I did not know that. I did not know that.
I know you're a Nazi, but we need your help to save a Jew. And the guy says, yes.
Wow.
Okay? Waldhardt was strategically chosen. He had studied at Columbia University in the early 1930s and had forged a relationship with Pell after the Evian Conference on Jewish Refugees in 1938. Seeing an opportunity to curry goodwill of the United States, Waldhardt secretly contacted Admiral William Canaras, the head of German military intelligence. Wow! The head of German military intelligence. And saying, hey man, let's help this guy. Canaras, a skeptical Nazi who disapproved of SS atrocities and thought the invasion of Poland a mistake, enlisted Major Ernst Bloch, a distinguished veteran of World War I and one of the most trusted officers. Bloch was a Mischling. Okay, a Mischling just means a German who had some Jewish ancestry, but because he was so valorous in World War I, he was considered a German, okay? He had been declared of German blood by Hitler in 1939. Along with 3 other soldiers, 2 of whom were also Mischling, Bloch was instructed to find Josef Yetzet and bring him to safety. Wow. The Nazis, okay, dispatched their own soldiers to find this guy and bring him to America. And this is, again, during war. But how do you find this guy? Bloch and his colleagues had to maneuver through the ruins of Warsaw without arousing the suspicions of the SS to find a rabbi who did not know of their mission and did not want to be found. Okay, so this rabbi is hiding from everyone. So how do you find this guy? And he's deadly afraid of all German soldiers because he sees them as just Nazis. This is another problem. Well, Jews in the city were naturally unwilling to divulge the location of a Hasidic leader to a Nazi officer. Eventually, the information came from the Americans. Brandeis was informed of Josef Yevet's address by the Shabbat lawyer Arthur Rubinowitz and relayed it via Cohen and Pell to the U.S. Chargé d'Affaires in Germany. This requires the coordination of dozens and dozens of people who are supposed to be on the opposite side of a war. And they're working together to achieve a goal. At the end of November, Bloch found Josef Yevet's apartment and after some confusion convinced the residents he was there to help. Once he had obtained fuel coupons, train tickets, and military clearances for SS checkpoints, Bloch loaded Josef Yetzet and his family onto a truck and headed for the train station. There the family received first-class tickets and boarded a train filled with Nazi officials and soldiers. Okay, and that's how they got him out. In other words, they are able to work above the bureaucracy of different nation states in order to achieve their eschatological goal. Okay? All right. Does it make sense? All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the idea of eschatological convergence. Because once we know the different eschatologies and we know how they converge together, we can actually make certain predictions about how this war will progress. Okay, so the first major eschatology.
I was one of his students. I wish I was in his, he was my professor in his class. He's very interesting, this man. A lot of knowledge here.
I want to look at, it's called Zoroastrianism. And this is the first eschatology. And it's an eschatology of the Persian Empire, okay? And this eschatology is very simple. In the world, there's truth and the lie, okay? The light and the darkness. And it is our responsibility as humans to live for the light, to die for the truth against the lie. And at the end of days, there will be a final battle and a day of judgment, okay? So light versus dark, and then you have a day of judgment. Okay, where the God, our master, will come down and he will create a paradise for everyone. Okay, so what matters is to live a noble life and await the day of judgment where eventually heaven on earth will manifest. Okay? And this is important because if you think about how the Iranians are fighting this war, the Iranians refuse to take the initiative and destroy too much, okay? They refuse to be the villains in this war because for them, in their eschatology, it's important to die for the light, to fight for the truth, okay? Now, Zoroastrianism has a major impact on Jewish eschatology, okay? And Jewish eschatology, again, I'm only talking about the most extreme version of this eschatology, okay? And in this eschatology, the idea is that the Jews disobeyed God, okay? Disobedience. And in order to repair the world, to save themselves, to create heaven on earth, they need to engage in redemption, okay? Redemption. And redemption is really about spiritual alchemy, improving yourself as a person, being good to yourself, being good to others, loving your neighbor as though you would love yourself. Okay, that's a mainstream idea. But in the most extreme version, redemption just means acting out God's plan to compel the return of the Messiah. Okay, and this plan is basically create Israel. Return Jewish diaspora, build third temple, and this will often called the War of Gog and Magog. And then when the Jews are most threatened, the Messiah will come to save them from their enemies. And this will create something called the Messianic age, okay? When God rules over the earth through his Messiah, who comes from the house of David. Okay, all right. So again, this is a simple version. There are lots of different versions. This is the most simple version for our purposes, okay? Now, what's interesting is that this Jewish eschatology would go on to influence the Protestants, okay? And this creates a movement called Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism, so the technical word for Christian Zionism is called premillennial dispensationalism. Okay, and this.
Oh yes, dispensationalism. One of my YouTube accounts, I don't know if it's this one or my gamer account, I'm subscribed to my old YouTube channel. Like one from many years ago. This is it. I did a series here talking about dispensations and the timing of the rapture. Man, I was a young, handsome man back then. I was about 24, 25, 26 years old in college.
My name is Donald, and I want to take this time to talk about some topics. Well, a particular topic on this video concerning dispensations. I was brought up in a apostolic congregation church, still attending one at the moment, but there's some things that I
looking at my young
hold
self
views that are different from what I was taught.
I
One of them
apologize for
is
the volume. I
the
mean,
doctrine of the 7 dispensations, and I'll just be upfront and honest with you. What got me interested in studying this subject, I had watched a movie called Mystery Babylon Exposed by a Bishop Clarence B. Harris from Alpha and Omega Productions, and he made mention, which was astonishing. I don't know if it was him personally or a preacher he had on the movie, made mention about the parable of the wheat and tares, and how the Lord takes the tares out of the kingdom first, and then he gathers the wheat in his barn. It was something clearly different than what I had heard in dispensationalism, that God in fact takes the wheat first, leaves the barn, and then leaves the tares to be burned. So it's a reverse of the order. Stuff like that does not set easy with me, especially when the scriptures say something totally different. The other thing is this issue of being saved under a dispensation, and then the way of being saved changes over time. Maybe the entrance requirements for it may be different, but I think God says emphatically that in Malachi, I don't know if it's Malachi 3 or chapter 4, where it says, I am the Lord and I change not, and how the book of Hebrews, the 13th chapter, says that Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. So Jesus Christ, the Son, just like his Father, is the same forever. Before we actually get into dispensationalism study, I got a couple Bibles here. I got my...
A side note here, this reminds me, something I just did reminded me of Obama. And I remember a kid coming into my job, and his mother was talking to me. She was like, his grandmother. He was like, Grandma, why are you talking to Obama, President Obama?
Study. I got a couple Bibles here. I got my King James Version and my New American Standard Bible version. I have the Strong's Concordance.
My head was smaller.
I'm going to read something.
I was skinnier, smaller head.
That's very... And I just lost my thought. What I was going to read was Romans chapter, I think it's the 4th chapter.
A little bit about dispensations. I thought I was going to read from the, yeah, I'm not going to get into this because I thought I was going to read from the topic of that Bible. I think I still have that. I'm pretty sure I still have that Bible. Not the particular one I have in my hand, but a copy of it.
Sounds very complicated, but it's not.
It was like topical index, and it discussed the dispensationalism system, who developed it, when it started, and then I learned what the word in Greek was for dispensation. That Greek word and it's translated in the King James Version as dispensation. But when you look at the Greek word and you look at the system of dispensationalism and what they define it as, that's not what the Greek word means. All right.
Means is that God has a plan for how to create heaven and earth, and we have a duty to fulfill his plan by following his instructions. Okay? All right. So what Christian Zionism is doing is that it takes this Jewish eschatology and makes certain changes to it. Okay? So, for example, the first change that it makes is, okay, this plan is fine, but rather than say that the Jewish Messiah is the representative of God, what they say is that, no, he's actually the representative of Satan. Okay? So the Messiah, in the Jewish tradition, becomes the Antichrist in the Christian Zionist tradition. And why is this important? It's important because for the Christians, the Messiah must be Jesus. Okay? So the Messiah, so the Antichrist, what he does is that he rules over the world. He's very charismatic, and he rules the world in Jerusalem. And he starts the war of Gog and Magog.
So what he's saying is correct. They do believe, a lot of people believe that of Christian faith, that the Antichrist would be a Jew. But I just recommend the perspective of Joel Richardson. He goes through Old Testament prophets. I mean, thoroughly. Like, he takes his time. I mean, I don't anticipate this something you can do in a weekend or in a couple of weekends. I mean, you would have to take carve out time on a regular basis to watch his videos, sit down, search the scriptures, go through the scriptures to see his point of view, that really our view may be incorrect. In fact, a lot of people think that Mystery Babylon is Rome because it talks about a city on 7 hills, but there was a new Rome that was established and basically became the capital of the Roman Empire, and it was Constantinople. Constantinople today is Istanbul, Turkey. The 7 churches in Revelation are churches that were in Asia Minor, which is composed of mostly Turkey and a part of Greece. The church of Smyrna, was it Smyrna or Pergamus? Pergamus. Jesus told John that this is the seat where it says this is where Satan's seat is. He's going to bring up Turkey here in a little bit. But Istanbul was rebuilt built as a new Rome, and it's also called a city on 7 hills. Now, there is a gentleman who actually believes that Istanbul is Mystery Babylon. Joel Richardson believes it's I think he believes it's Mecca. I'm not sure that he's correct that that's Mecca. I'm not sure what Mystery Babylon is. Some people say it's America. Joel gives his reasons why it can't be America, which I agree with that, but I'm not sure I agree with his take on Mecca. I'm not sure if I agree with the guy that Istanbul is Mystery Babylon either. But let's see here. Istanbul is Mystery Babylon, the Great Whore. This is when I first saw. I guess there's a book you can get. Bible Prophecy Investigator. Yeah, I had this book, or my mom has this book. I discover why Rome cannot be Mystery Babylon. But there's a guy you'll find on YouTube who talks about Joel explains why Jerusalem's not Mystery Babylon either. I don't know why the guy's not coming up in my search feed. He's probably in my history, though. Because I believe last weekend, watched it. Wow, I watched this many videos since last weekend. That's amazing. That is amazing. Like, I've watched that many. Yeah, wasn't it? Around this time I was watching some of this. Maybe it was my other account. Maybe it wasn't this account. Maybe it was my other account that I was interesting, because I don't see it. I don't see it coming up. The older man. Well, I guess we will move on here.
In order to conquer the world and destroy the Jews. At this point, Jesus will return to save God's chosen people, the Jews. And when Jesus returns, there'll be something called the rapture, where all Christians will immediately ascend to heaven. Okay? So the rapture. All right. Okay? So again, Christian Zionism is working off Jewish eschatology, but it's making some important changes. Okay? So another way of saying this is, in the beginning, Zionists and Christian Zionists will work together to reach a certain point of history, okay, what we call the Great Israel Project, but then they will diverge and fight against each other. Okay?
I found it. It's called Third Ego Books. Third Ego Books. Popular videos. The Antichrist will come from Istanbul, Turkey. This is what he's coming.
Welcome to Revelation Unraveled.
Proof Obama's not the Antichrist. I don't know if he's pre-tribulation or not. America will be hell on earth after World War III. Wow, I want to watch that, see what insight he's got on that. But yeah, this is this one was this is an interesting one here. The Antichrist will come from Istanbul.
Welcome to.
All right, back to the video.
So they're allies now, but eventually they'll turn against each other. All right, so now I want to talk about the Freemasons. Because the Freemasons, we'll talk more about the Freemasons later, okay? The Freemasons are also working within the Christian Zionist context. But they are much more focused on actually how to implement this, okay? So what they want to do is they want to take the Antichrist and turn it into a system. And this system we discussed last semester, it's called Pax Judaica. What is Pax Judaica? Pax Judaica is that Israel controls the world through AI, okay, an AI surveillance state. Okay? Or their exact words is Holy Empire. Okay? And Pax Judaica, the Israeli state, will have things such as the mark of the beast. And what is the mark of the beast? It is digital ID. Okay? And this digital ID will also lead to digital currency. And they can actually put a microchip or a QR bar in your forehead, and this will be considered the mark of the beast, okay? And this is all part of the Christian Zionist eschatology. Another really important thing about the Freemasons is the idea of a one world government. Because remember, the Antichrist is the leader of a one world government, and it'll be based in Jerusalem, okay? And
that's what he's picking that up from Christian thoughts. This would be the Antichrist would be Jewish. Let me pull up this video real quick here. Speaking of one world government, this is a concept in New Testament. Some think it's what they were talking about all along. Politicians talking about a one world, what do they call it? New World Order. You have on the back of the dollar bill the pyramids, and underneath it says Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means one secular order, or one or I'm sorry, new secular order or new world order. That's on the bottom. And then we know the George Bush line, old famous New World Order speech
of its founders.
We have before us the opportunity to forge
for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations.
And he talked about it several
What is
times
at
during his
stake
speech.
is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
We got Bill Clinton.
From 1945 and the end of the war through 1989 and the end of the Cold War, we had a worldview. Republican and Democratic presidents alike, from Harry Truman to George Bush, stood for freedom and stood for certain propositions that would make America strong and healthy and grow the middle class and shrink poverty and stand against communism. And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order, and instead it looks like we got a lot of disorder. And we still, and after 9/11, we've been more sensitive to the
Hillary Clinton.
But only when the Messiah arrives.
Oh, they're not showing the whole thing here. Oh, let's see if I
But
can get
only.
this. That's Walter Cronkite from CBS News. He's deceased now. Hillary Clinton's New World Order. They must have taken this down from YouTube, and the only one you can catch is this. But Walter Cronkite is talking about basically mocking Christians because he says that they want more government. This is the World Federalist Organization, and he's given an award to Hillary, not Secretary Clinton. She was First Lady Clinton at the time. This was on a closed circuit television, and he was talking about world government, and he mocked Pat Robertson of the 700 Club of late memory. He mocked him, quoting Pat Robertson's book, saying, we'll have world government, there'll only be peace, but it would only be when the Messiah returns. And any attempt at world government for them is clearly the work of the devil or the work of the Antichrist. And then let's just listen.
When the Messiah arrives. He wrote, and literally, any attempt to achieve world order before that time must be the work of the devil. Well, join me. I'm glad to sit here at the right hand of Satan.
I'd like to bring you a message from the First Lady of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Good evening and congratulations, Walter, on receiving the World Federalist Association's Global Governance Award. For more than a generation in America, it wasn't the news until Walter Cronkite told us it was the news. Every night at 6 o'clock, we welcomed you into our living rooms and listened as you explained the complex events of the day, whether it was the space race or the Vietnam War.
Come to think about it, we'll drive.
And so the headquarters will be Solomon's Temple, or the third temple. All right, okay. So these are the, and then you have the Islamic eschatology, okay? In the Islamic eschatology is a response to all these other eschatologies, where they say that when the system is created, it'll be called Dajjal, the anti.
Let me pull this up because I found the file. I did this. I edited this, put this together a long time ago. I had to take it down because of the audio on here. So let me.
Police, when he called me, I'd make it a practice.
Because him.
Long track record to get a woman.
and the end of the war through
New world order. A world where the rule of
President.
Word secrecy is
Oh. You gotta watch this speech by JFK because he talks about this stuff.
a monolithic.
I can't play it because the music is gonna the music is gonna get me struck down. I'm not gonna be watching.
Support and
Express her support and allegiance to the world government. She made this announcement to the World Federalist Association directly from the White House during Bill Clinton's second term as president of the United States. We just watched this. Again, I don't want to play anything that's going to get my channel, get a strike on my channel.
And it's toward a North American Union, just like early on there was a move on for a European National Commission exists. And
the voice you're about to hear is of Ron Paul. He used to be Congressman Ron Paul of Texas. He was a libertarian. His son is the Senator Rand Paul.
well, it all depends on what you mean by all of this. The CFR exists, the Trilateral Commission exists, and it's a, quote, conspiracy of ideas. This is an ideological battle. Some people believe in globalism, others of us believe in national sovereignty. And there is a move on toward a North American Union, just like early on there was a move on for a European Union, and it eventually ended up. So we had NAFTA and moving toward a NAFTA highway. These are real things. It's not somebody made these up. It's not a conspiracy. They don't talk about it, and they might not admit about it, but there's been money spent on it. There was legislation passed in the Texas legislature unanimously to put a hold on it. They're planning on millions of acres taken by eminent domain for an international highway from Mexico to Canada, which is going to make the immigration problem that much worse. So it's not so much a secretive conspiracy. It's a contest between ideologies, whether we believe in our institutions here, our national sovereignty, our Constitution, or are we going to further move in the direction of international government, more UN? You know, this country goes to war under UN resolutions. I don't like big government in Washington, so I don't like this trend toward international government. We have a...
Yeah, he goes on and on. I'm afraid that music might get this this video taken down too if I post this to YouTube. Or maybe I'll just put it on DVD. Maybe I can get around it by doing that. But if I do put this on YouTube, I don't want to play too much more of that. But, you know, President Trump had run on, you know, being, you know, non-globalist, but he's betrayed a lot of his America First agenda. You know, Ron Paul would talk about that.
The scenes, and she's exposed.
They plan to take Trump out as a president. He was specific as the intent.
This is another reason why I didn't want this video up. But
World War II.
Here, listen to this. This is important here.
About the SPP, except to make fun of it as a conspiracy theory. But for you to truly understand possibilities of secret agreements done without consent of the people and the country's legislatures. The most devastating one occurred under George W. Bush, called the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. There was almost no media exposure about the SPP, except to make fun of it as a conspiracy theory. But for you to truly understand the origin of the North American Union, you would need to go back to World War II. Even before it was completed, they had a strategy for the nations, to be implemented in 1945 with the birth of the UN. A map was published back in 1941, and it depicted a world broken into approximately 10 regions. And one of those regions was the North American Union scenario. They set it up long ago.
You notice something here? What's this country here in blue with the US, Canada, Mexico? Greenland. We got China here. We got the Soviet Union. And Ukraine is somewhere over in here as part of this whole Soviet Socialist Republic, Union of USSR, Ukraine. What's happening in history? We're trying to get Greenland, and the Soviet Union is trying to get Ukraine back.
The ambition of a secret cabal lurking in the shadows, working to implement a new world order. In a 1990 speech given by George H.W. Bush, we heard this reinforced. What was implemented post-World War II will be carried out. Donald Trump isn't going to stop that.
This is a new and different world. Not since 1945 have we seen the real possibility of using the United Nations as it was designed, as a center for international collective security. It is in our hands to leave these dark machines behind, the dark ages where they belong, and to press forward to cap a historic movement towards a new world order in a long era of peace. We have a vision of a new partnership of nations, a partnership based on consultation, cooperation, and collective action, especially through international and regional organizations. A partnership united by principle and the rule of law and supported by an equitable sharing of both cost and commitment. A partnership whose goals are to increase democracy, increase prosperity, increase the peace.
Of the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America.
That's the Club of Rome map, by the way. It's basically 10 nations, 10 regions. And Bible talks about in the end times, the whole prophetic timeline ending in the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's statue. The government there was iron mixed with clay. Iron was symbolic of Rome, so a little bit of Romanism, and then the clay, the weak and fragility of this union. But ultimately, that statue gets crushed by a stone that was hewn out without human hands. It comes down, it's crushed. It's the Messiah coming out, defeating.
The SPP, which many consider to be.
The year 2000 marks a turning point, beginning not only the turn of the decade, not only the turn of the century, but also the turn of the millennium. I see a world of open borders, open trade, and most importantly, open minds.
I don't know where to start. I'll start with this. My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders. Matt Bennett,
This is the WikiLeaks release of Clinton Wall Street speeches saying the same thing as George Bush. Mind you, this is right and left. This is the right and left of the political spectrum. Don't be fooled by the two sides. It's like,
I'll give it to you as a Democrat who worked for President Clinton about what this tells us about the Democratic nominee. It's true these haven't been authenticated. It is true this haven't. It's not that we don't have verification that these are her words and they haven't been manipulated. But so far we are not hearing that from Team Clinton. They're not coming out and challenging the authenticity yet. I'll start with this. My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders. I'll start with this. My dream is a hemispheric.
and we know the wall, that whole project that Mexico was supposed to pay for it, never.
I see a world building on the emerging new model of European unity, open trade, and most importantly,
European Union.
Open minds. And most importantly, open minds. And most importantly, open minds. And most importantly,
the third
open
eye,
minds.
New
And
Age,
most importantly,
Aleister Crowley,
open minds. The New World Order.
When Barack Obama went to Cuba, opened the border with the Cuban people, most celebrated this, believing it to be a good thing. And while we should support freedom for the Cuban people, we have to understand that Obama is merely following a blueprint for a new world order seen in the World War II map. While Bush opened up the mainland continent with the SPP, it's been Obama who has unlocked the entirety of the North American Union. Our presidents have accomplished. Are you now
really
seeing
hasn't come to
these individuals,
fruition
Soros,
yet.
Bush, the establishment of member Martin Wolf, media characters like William Crystal,
David
George Will,
Rockefeller.
Ross Douthat of the New York Times, hate Trump? These protectionist stances?
This is when I had to view that Trump was a good guy. So I do not view President Trump in that. Haven't since 2019, end of 2019, early 2020. I don't remember. 2020. We shall have world government whether or not you like it. The only question is whether the world government will be achieved by conquest or consent. Council on Foreign Relations. It would have been possible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the light of publicity during those years. The world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. Supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practice in past centuries. David Rockefeller, Council on Foreign Relations.
Power. And if we have learned anything from history, it is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
What do we see? A lot of power be given to the presidency by both Congress and the Supreme Court. And what I mean the Supreme Court, we're dealing directly with the presidential immunity ruling. And what that has allowed Trump
threat
to
to
get
the
away
United
with.
States is a threat to Canada. Like
So this gets off on something different, but wanted to show you that real quick here. Let's get back to
Christ, okay? And when this happens, then Jesus will return to defeat the Antichrist. Okay, that's the mainstream Islamic eschatology. Then you have the Shia.
Hold on, something just came to mind here. I think it's Revelation. The whole chapter. This is about Mystery Babylon, the Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. And the beast. There are 7 kings, 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does, he must remain for only a little while. Beast that was and now is not, and is an 8th king. Joe Richardson gets into this prophecy a lot, who belongs to the other 7 and is going into destruction. The 10 horns, which are the 10 kingdoms or kings, you saw are 10 kings who have not yet at John's time when he's writing this, have not yet received a kingdom, but will receive 1 hour of authority as kings along with the beast. These kings have one purpose: to yield their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, which is Jesus Christ, and the Lamb will triumph over them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and he will be accompanied by his called and chosen and faithful ones. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute was seated, and peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues, and the 10 horns and the beast that you saw will hate the prostitute. They will leave her desolate and naked, and they will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by uniting to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Now, when God is doing the one that's orchestrating everything, it's different than when man is doing it. But he's incorporating man in this process. He says he's put it in their hearts to do what they're doing, to give their authority to the beast so that he can fulfill about his purposes, which his ultimate purpose is to establish his kingship in the earth. He wants to reign. God will.
Okay, the Shia are the Iranians, where they believe that it will be the 12th Iman.
And when we're talking about God, I'm talking about a specific God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Father of our Lord. Here's a book. This book is by Dwight Pryor. Dr. Dwight, I don't know if he's a doctor. Dwight A. Pryor. Called A Different God. Oh, that's in a different language. I want to make sure we're talking about the correct God. Center for JC Studies. Let's see. Media. sources. Where is their store? Well, I can't believe they don't have this on here. I have. Okay, I have that video series. I don't have that. I used to have this. I have this CD. Here it is. Reassessing the place of Israel and the church in God's story. Foundational book. Another book. This is currently unavailable. Man, I will probably have to read this. Someone said this will be a fab read for you. I have a digital copy of it. I don't have a physical. In my Apple Books. Pull it up for you. So he goes into the meaning of replacement theology, how we read the Bible, a different view of God. He says this may come as a shock to some Christians, but listen in Romans 1 verse 1 to what the Apostle Paul says. He identifies himself as a servant of Messiah Jesus, as one called to be an apostle set apart for the gospel of God. We do not think like this as Christians. For us, it is the gospel, period. Maybe the gospel of Christ, or if we think more like Jesus, it is the gospel of the kingdom of God. But Paul says it is the gospel of God. He uses the same phrase in the 15th chapter when he says that he has been called to be a minister of the Messiah to the Gentiles in the priestly service of the gospel of God, so that the offering of the Gentiles may be acceptable, sanctified by the Holy Spirit. And that's Romans 15:16. Romans was probably Paul's last letter and the most sophisticated of his theological reflections, but in his first letter, 1 Thessalonians, he uses the same terminology 3 times, the gospel of God. Paul is a man called to proclaim some good news. Okay. Okay. Let me just finish. Let me continue. Paul is a man called to proclaim some good news regarding God, and for him that means the God of Israel. We find the same terminology used in Mark's gospel and again in St. Peter's first epistle. What I'm suggesting then is that we need to understand that the proclamation of Christianity at its most fundamental level is that the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has acted in Jesus the Messiah for the sake of the whole world. This is the God to whom Jesus prayed. This is the God who raised Jesus from the dead. We tend to say Christ rose from the dead, but the scriptures attest again and again to the fact that God raised Jesus from the dead. This also is the God to whom the Gentiles are brought near through Jesus' sacrifice. Paul says to the Thessalonians that the effect of their hearing the gospel of God is that they turn from their idols to worship the true and living, or the living and true God. 1 Thessalonians 1:9. May I suggest then that when we read Paul's letters and we see the word God in our minds, let us think God of Israel. Not just some cosmic God, not just some universal God. It's a specific God. The God of Israel. This is the same God who, in the end, according to the Apostle Paul, will be all in all. Speaking of the final resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15 states, then comes the end, when the Son will deliver the kingdom back to the Father so that he may be all in all. 1 Corinthians 15, verses 24 and 28. When Jesus instructed his disciples in prayer, he directed their prayer to the Father, to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He says, I came to reveal the Father, for nobody knows a father like a son. As Christians, we have lost sight of the specificity, the particularity of God's identity. He even gives a proper name to Moses by which he is to be remembered through all generations. Unfortunately, in Christian tradition, that name became distorted as Jehovah. But Yod-He, Vav-He, which is read as Adonai or the Lord in Jewish tradition, is a name that is used some 3,000 times in the Hebrew Bible. This is not the abstract God of the philosophers, the unmoved mover, the first cause, the ground of being. This is the God that Israel proclaims. He has a name, he has an identity, And in his sovereign, free, and gracious election, he has chosen to identify himself with a particular family, offspring of Abraham, and through that family to be a blessing to all the families in the earth. Supersessionism falls short in this regard because it is an incomplete view of God. It tends to think of God in abstract, universal terms and of salvation in individualistic and metaphysical categories, which brings me to my next point. A different narrative of scripture, that's a topic on there, a different relationship, a different view of history, unity, not uniformity. It's a short book. It's 17 pages. Maybe I'll do a video on that. Okay. I said I was going to stop pausing this.
Madid.
Got to get through this.
Who will lead the followers. When this happens, then Jesus will return to defeat the Antichrist. Okay, that's the mainstream Islamic eschatology. Then you have the Shia. Okay, the Shia are the Iranians, where they believe that it will be the 12th Imam Mahdi who will lead the followers, okay, the Ummah. Okay, Ummah just means community of believers, into victory against the Antichrist, the Dajjal, okay? So you can see how these eschatologies are basically lining up together, right? The Shia are the Iranians. The Islamic is the entire Arab world, right? Now, there are two more eschatologies I want to look at. And again, I know this is a lot. I know this is too much information. And we'll go over these eschatologies specifically as we move along, okay? But I just want to introduce the different eschatologies. Another eschatology that's very important is the Catholic eschatology. And in the Catholic eschatology, we can call City of God, okay, which is the church, which is Jerusalem. And St. Augustine talks about this, about how the Catholic Church, it is the millennium, it is the Messianic age, because we represent God and we bring peace and prosperity to the world. Now, what's important about the church is that it became the dominant power in the world because Rome fell, okay? So Roman Empire collapses. But this is all part of God's divine plan, because Roman Empire, Rome, was the city of earth, okay, of power, of money, of wealth. And what matters is Jerusalem, the city of God, of spirituality, of divinity, okay? Now, the city of God came to an end because of the rise of the Protestants and the Anglo-American Empire. So for the Catholic Church to achieve its eschatology and establish, again, the city of God, what they need to do is also see the Anglo-American Empire destroyed, just like the Roman Empire. Okay? So that is the Catholic eschatology. The last eschatology I want to discuss is the Orthodox eschatology. And what's the Orthodox eschatology? The Russians. Okay? And this is called the Third Rome prophecy. Okay? The Third Rome prophecy is basically that Moscow will become the third Rome. Okay, the first Rome was Rome, second Rome was Constantinople, the third Rome will be Moscow. And also what's really important to appreciate is that there will be no fourth Rome. So when Moscow becomes a third Rome, history ends. Okay, and peace and prosperity will come to the world. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that Russia will unite the Orthodox world. Okay, so right now the Orthodox world is split into Eastern Orthodoxy and Greek Orthodoxy. Okay, and something that is very important that this prophecy says is that the Russians will defeat Turkey in a war, and then have the Greeks return to Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul. Okay, that's what the prophecy says. And so you look at all these different eschatologies, okay? And again, guys, this is the majority of the world, right? If you actually look at the convergence points, you come to some startling conclusions, okay? So let's look at the convergence. All right, where do they converge? Okay, well, first of all, okay, where they converge is that the greater Israel project will be achieved, okay? Pax Judaica will be achieved. It's the one world government, okay? One world government. That is one major convergence. If that's true, then another convergence is the Al-Aqsa Mosque will give way to the third temple. All these eschatologies either say this or are indifferent to saying this, okay? They're not opposed to this, all right? So that's why I predict the Al-Aqsa Mosque will be destroyed because they need to build a third temple. Another thing in which they converge is the rise of anti-Semitism. Why? Because that will force the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, to return to Israel. This is very important for this eschatology, okay? All right. Another important convergence point is the war of Gog and Magog. We don't actually know what this is, but this war is supposed to be the final war before the return of God, before the end of history, before the end of the world, okay? What this war is, we don't know yet. But another thing is that this war in Iran will lead to the war of Gog and Magog at some point, okay? What this war is, we'll discuss at a later time. Another thing that's very important is US and China are not part of this eschatology. Okay? This is where everyone agrees. For whatever reason, the United States is not going to partake in future events.
Listen to what he says upcoming. I mean, this is what I have been concerned about. Because I don't see a clear-cut passage of scriptures that describes the United States, which currently now is the world's largest superpower. But we're in debt. Trillions. Over 32 trillion in debt, I believe, is the over 32 trillion. I think it's over that amount. I don't think people have a grasp of how much $1 trillion is. Describe $1 trillion. It would $1 trillion would roughly take 31,546 years to count at a rate of $1 per second. In $100 bills, $1 trillion would cover over 2 football fields stacked double high on pallets. Approximately 478 semi-trailer trucks. Now, we're not $1 trillion in debt, though. What is the U.S. national debt? As of March, it's over 38.8 trillion. Rapidly approaching 40 trillion, driven by high interest rates and mandatory spend. And this money has to be paid back with interest. The debt is roughly 120% of gross domestic product, with debt service becoming a major budgetary constraint. Here's the national debt clock. That's $113,980 for every single person in America. That's not every single working person. That's every single person. Babes, seniors, disabled. That's every person. America's growing debt is a result of simple math each year. There is a mismatch between spending and revenues. And if you watch the video I recommended earlier about the biggest scam in the history of the globe or whatever it was, you'll understand how this debt system works, and it will blow your mind. But I don't think we're a superpower anymore. How else does this world government come to play? How else are there the prominence becoming in the 10 kings who give their power to the beast? How is the Antichrist rise? There has to be something, a shift, a global shift in power. And I'm concerned we're rapidly approaching that point. Those who have children, I feel for you people, man. I feel for the children. Because I don't know what they're going to have to go through. I don't know. It could, in my lifetime, I'm only in my mid 40s. We could see this stuff rapidly happen in the next, it could be the next few months. It could be the next few years. It could be the next decade. It could be the next 2 decades. It could still be in my lifetime. It could be in a few weeks. Things start progressing to that. I just don't know. My thing is, I want to warn you guys. I want you to see what's going on. And it's amazing, this guy, his knowledge and the fact that he predicted 2 events that have happened. The third is he predicts we're going to lose the war with Iran. This war could economically collapse this nation. We don't know yet. He's going to talk about Turkey. Joel Richardson talks about the rise of Turkey. The book of Revelation, that whole concern with Satan's seat being in Turkey, which was in Pergamos. This could be the spot where the Antichrist arrives out of. Modern day Bergama, Turkey, known as a major cultural, political, religious center. Used to have that, was it a statue to Zeus or something there? The Great Altar of Pergamon on display. This was in Germany. They put this in Germany. Famous structures, the monumental altar, sometimes the Great Altar, which was probably dedicated to Zeus and Athena. The foundations are still located in the upper city, but the remains of the Pergamon frieze, which originally decorated it, are displayed in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, Germany, where parts of the frieze taken to Germany have been installed in a part. See, Hitler had that thing too. The Nazis. Adolf Hitler was fascinated by the ancient Pergamon altar of Zeus, referred to in Revelation as Satan's throne, excavated from Turkey and housed in Berlin's Pergamon Museum. See, I mean, you guys, this is from Christian Broadcasting Network about Pergamon and Nazi Germany.
Ancient Pergamon, the center of pagan worship in Asia Minor, once known as the place where Satan dwells. In the 1st century, it was a thriving city. But after countless wars and natural disasters, the temples of Pergamon lay in ruins.
By the mid-19th century, the once great city of Pergamon was barely a memory. The locals were using the site as a quarry, looting the marble for new buildings, until 1864, when a German engineer paid a visit.
Karl Humann was shocked by the destruction of the priceless artifacts, so he got permission to excavate the ancient city himself. And what he found was one of the greatest monuments in history, the altar of Zeus.
Stone by stone, the altar was excavated and brought here to Berlin, and then it was reassembled and placed in its own museum.
The Pergamon Museum was finished in 1930, with the altar as its centerpiece. Eventually, it caught the eye of a young man named Albert Speer, the new chief architect for the Nazi Party, Adolf Hitler had commissioned him to design the parade grounds for the party rallies in Nuremberg. And for inspiration, Speer turned to the Pergamon altar.
Speer gives all the credit to Hitler. I think that he's like a good interior decorator that someone hires, and that client already has the ideas of what he wants to do, and the decorator agrees with him and just fulfills them. So that's what Speer did.
Using the altar as his model, Speer created a colossal grandstand at the rally grounds. It became known as the Zeppelin Tribune. After the war, only a small...
I'm sorry, I kind of dozed off there. I went into trance. I've been up. It's 8 a.m. I think I started this at 3 in the morning. So, wow. I'm sleepy. I'm drinking a cup of coffee, but let's get through the video because we need to get through the video. He's going to talk about Turkey, though, a little bit.
Neither will China, which means that something will happen to these two countries that will make them not significant anymore, okay? And the best prediction for the United States then is civil war, right? Okay, civil war. Okay, and this is where all these eschatologies converge. So in other words, this war in Iran is happening so that these different eschatological traditions can achieve heaven on earth from their perspective. All right? So what this means, so given this convergence, we can actually predict certain events that will happen over the next 2 to 4 years. Okay? Because they all want these things to happen together. All right? So let's look at some quick predictions. Okay? First prediction, of course, is that the US will use ground troops. Because using ground troops will create a national draft. And what does a national draft do? It creates a civil war. Right? A lot of young people are going to refuse to fight in this war. And this is going to create protests. Then America will have no choice but to deploy the National Guard. And this will create the recipe for a lot of civil conflict in America. Okay? Another thing that will happen is because you use ground troops, you will lose the war, and then CENTCOM, which is the American military in the Middle East, will then transfer over to Israel. Okay? What's happening in this war is that the economies of the GCC are being destroyed. And that's part of the plan. Okay? Because for Israel to achieve the Greater Israel Project, it needs to absorb the GCC and parts of Turkey and parts of Egypt. Okay? So in other words,
Turkey. That's Turkey.
What I'm saying this is that the GCC is basically finished. The intention is to collapse their economies and make them irrelevant. Right? The third thing we can expect is that Turkey will enter this war, and Saudi Arabia actually will enter the war. Because you want to use this war to weaken opposition to these eschatologies as much as possible. Okay? So
could this be where the Antichrist then arises? If he arises out of Turkey, could this be the part? Could Turkey enter the war in Saudi Arabia or just Turkey? And could there be a rise of some great political leader? Maybe he arises and makes a covenant of peace with Israel. That's spoken of in the book of Daniel about a covenant made with many. Listening to this guy brought all these thoughts to me, and I felt like I had to do a video on this subject. We could see in my lifetime the rise of the Antichrist.
Turkey and Saudi Arabia will enter this war, and they will suffer tremendously because of their participation. All right.
And I know
again,
know
the Al-Aqsa Mosque will be destroyed. Okay? And then you have the rise of Persia. The rise of Persia. Why is this important? Because you need the Islamic world to unite against Israel for the end of days, right? So you don't mind if actually Iran wins this war, because by winning this war, Iran will activate its Persian identity. And this is important for eschatology because in the war of Gog and Magog, people are interpreting Gog and Magog, which will march against Israel. They're interpreting Gog and Magog to be Persia and Russia. Okay?
The only reason why they say Russia is because of the word, there's a city, I think Rosh or something, and they say because it sounds like Russia. But Rosh just means head or chief. So I don't quite think that they had anything with that prophecy had anything to do with Russia. I don't think so. But could be wrong. Could be wrong. I'm always open-minded because we only know things as things are progressing and how they fit in Bible prophecy. But in Bible prophecy, let's go to Zechariah chapter 2. No, it's not chapter 2. It's chapter 12. Oh, I'm tired. Zechariah chapter 12, and I'm gonna try to speed up so that we can get through this video. The burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretches forth the heavens and layeth the foundations of the earth and formeth the spirit of man with him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, and they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All the burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. So it's like a unified the nations of the world coming against Jerusalem. In that day, saith the Lord, which here is the name of God, actually, but this is a circumlocution, a substitute. I will smite every horse with astonishment and his rider with madness, and I will open mine eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength, and the Lord of hosts their God. Let me go to verse 7. We'll skip. The Lord shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And he that is feeble among them that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, and the angel of the Lord before them. I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look on me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. And in that day there shall be great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of they're going to witness him who they pierced. This is a messianic prophecy. They're going to see Jesus, and they'll mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son. This is where the scales of their eyes come off. Then you go to chapter 14. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity. And the remainder of the people shall not be cut off from the city. So half of them go into captivity, but there's half of them that stay. Then the Lord goes forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. Jesus ascended from that place. And the angel said in Acts chapter 1, he's going to descend. As you saw him leave, this is the same way he comes back, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east. And so there's an earthquake, and it splits the Mount of Olives in half. And there shall be a great white valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day there shall be one Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and his name one. His name the only name. It shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the king, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the feast of tabernacles. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall there be no rain. That the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the feast of tabernacles. In that day there shall be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord, and the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. Yea, every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts. And all they that sacrifice shall come and take of them and seed therein. And in that day there shall be no more Canaanite in the house of the Lord. And then you go to Joel chapter 2. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand. A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness. As the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong, there have not been ever like the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Yea, nothing shall escape them. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly. I'll restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm, the caterpillar, and the palmer worm, my great army which I have sent among you, and you shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God that hath dwelt wondrously with you, and my people shall never be ashamed. And you shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and none else, and my people shall never be ashamed. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days I will pour out my spirit. And I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant who the Lord shall call. So not everyone's going to survive. It's going to be a remnant whom the Lord shall call. Oh, this would be a good time to refer to one more last video. It's called Testimony of Prophecy. Oh, Beyond Belief. When did Judaism and Christianity separate? I might watch that. Beyond coincidence. The Testimony of Prophecy. This goes through prophecies that have already been fulfilled and that shall come to pass. If you believe, this will convince you that there is a real God and that the Bible is the word of God. Testimony of Prophecy is the website. Beyond Coincidence, the Testimony of Prophecy. Okay. I think I'm done talking. Let's hear him out.
Okay. Together they will march against Pax Judaica. Number 6 is that in Israel, you will achieve the Pax Judaica and the Greater Israel Project. Okay, so the Greater Israel Project and Pax Judaica are not the same thing, guys. Greater Israel is just basically the territory that the Israelis believed that God had promised their ancestor Abraham. Pax Judaica is a one world government, okay, based on AI surveillance and the mark of the beast. So what will happen is that Israel will use this war to expand its territory, and then what will happen is that capital, technology, will then start to flow to Israel in order to create the Pax Judaica. So think of companies like NVIDIA, Oracle, Microsoft, Google. Well, they'll probably transfer themselves to Israel because that is where the power will rest.
And see, I don't know if he's correct about this, But I mean, this is his theory. I'm not going to object to anything he's saying. I don't know how this is going to play out. And I'm taking note of what he's saying though. Like this could actually happen the way he's talking it. But again, I mean, it's based on his theory, his knowledge of what he understands of everything. We all have different bits and pieces where we study and learn things. I don't know if he's right, but we will one day find out, and possibly in our lifetimes.
Okay. So Pax Judaica. Then you will have Russia winning the war.
But this could also be a cause for increase in anti-Semitism. Not that what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, what he's done in Gaza, what he's doing with pulling us into this war would increase anti-Semitism against Jewish people. It's already, you already see it increasing. People already were getting that way, but now they're getting that way even more. You could see how things plan out where everyone wants to gather against Jerusalem to battle and come against the Jewish people. I could see why people would why the saints of the Most High God, believers would be persecuted. That the scripture says that the dragon will make war with the saints and with the Lamb. Why? Because we have put a person like Donald Trump into office. We have been the ones that have supported him as like the evangelical church and things of that nature. And he's pushing things towards these. This is why I did not vote this last election. I didn't vote the election before. I haven't voted since 2016 or the 2016 election or presidential election. So it's been 8 years. But I knew supporting the president was not something my faith would support. And I can't support, the leftist agenda either in what they support for my religious beliefs. So I would consider the right, but Donald Trump is not the man. Anybody with a true saving faith, biblical knowledge, on top of that saving faith and wisdom would not have supported that man. They would have stayed home at the polls. Unless the Holy Spirit had some. Don't see the Holy Spirit doing that. All right.
In Ukraine, okay? And then return Greeks to Constantinople. Basically, another way of saying this is, it is possible that the Greeks go to war against Turkey, and then Russia supports the Greeks and return the Greeks to Istanbul, okay? But then you're like, wait a minute, Turkey is a NATO member. Well, we can also expect destruction of Europe, okay? The end of NATO, basically. So, this war in Ukraine, it's not just about Russia protecting its borders. This war in Ukraine is also meant to achieve Orthodox eschatology, to destroy Europe, to destroy NATO, so that Russia can achieve the third Rome prophecy. That means the destruction of Europe. So I will discuss the Russian-Ukraine war later on as we go along, okay? But what I'm trying to show you is that just by, analyzing the most extreme eschatologies of different religious traditions, you can then, from this analysis, pick out points in which they agree. Okay? And at these points, you can figure out then how they will affect current geopolitics to make certain predictions about how the war will progress, about how the world will transform itself in the next 2 to 4 years. Okay? So this is called the law of eschatological convergence. It gives us tremendous insight into why things are turning out the way they are. Okay? Because again, I keep on saying this, but purely from a geopolitical perspective, purely from a realpolitik perspective, this war in Iran makes no sense. But If you look at it from an eschatological perspective, then it makes perfect sense. Okay? Any questions? Yes.
But I think, like, if we look into the war between America and Iran, I think Trump is trying to destroy Iran as the same way that he destroys Venezuela, but it fails, which led Iran to fight back. So I think this could also explain in a political way, but not religious.
Okay. All right, that's a great point in that, listen, there's an explanation, which is that Trump is just stupid. He's arrogant. They had too much success in Venezuela. They go into Iran, and they think it's the same thing, and now they're losing, okay? And because they're losing, they are just panicking, okay? Okay, that's true. And if this explanation is true, then what will happen, what we can expect to happen is that Trump declares victory and goes home. Okay? That's what we can expect. And if the US does go home, then you're right. Okay? So we can expect, but sorry, the question then is what happens next few months? All right. What you need to understand is this. War is not simple. Once you start a war, you can't end the war. All right? So let me explain really quickly why, okay? So you have Iran, and the main advantage that Iran has over the United States is the GCC cannot defend itself, okay? Because it's just a desert. And Iran, it's a mountain fortress, so it can shoot rockets, it can shoot drones at the GCC, and the GCC can't defend itself, okay? Before they thought these US bases could defend against Iran, but now you recognize these US bases can't defend themselves either, okay? All right, so the other thing that Iran did was close out the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, they closed out the Strait of Hormuz. And this is important because the GCC then exports oil to Asia and gets back food, okay? So the GCC basically requires the Strait of Hormuz in order just to survive, okay? Now, let's just say that US, Donald Trump's like, you know what, screw this. This is a stupid war. The Middle East is stupid. We're gonna go home, okay? What happens now? What happens is that Iran says to GCC, hey man, you attacked us. You destroyed our infrastructure. You destroyed our economy. You have to pay a compensation, okay? Right? Also, hey man, now we control the Strait of Hormuz, so if you want to use Strait of Hormuz, you have to pay us a toll. You have to pay us a tax. Right? So all this money of the GCC, before it's going to the United States to fuel the US economy, now where does it go? It goes to Iran. Right? That's a lot of money, man. We're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars. And what will Iran use with this money? It will use this money to repair its economy. So in 5 to 10 years, this is going to be an economic miracle. Where now Iran is able to industrialize really fast. And as a result, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is that if the United States leaves the Middle East, Iran becomes the superpower and controls the entire Middle East. Right? Now Israel has nuclear weapons. And so what's going to happen is that Israel and Iran will sign a peace treaty. Okay? But the United States won't be involved. The United States goes home, it doesn't get any money from the GCC, and what's going to happen to the US economy? It's going to collapse. Why? Because the entire US economy is based on the stock market, on finance, on AI, on investment from the GCC, right? So the question then is, can the Americans go home? The answer is, no, they can't. Because if they go home, their economy is going to collapse, and the people are going to have a revolution anyway. So you're better off sending people to Iran than have the people in America cause a revolution, right? Okay? So you're right in that it's possible that Donald Trump made a mistake, but it doesn't matter if it was intentional or accidental. You have the same outcome. And strangely enough, this outcome that you have matches that, aligns with these different eschatologies in the world. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, all right. Any more questions? All right, okay, so we'll continue this next week, guys, okay?